Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. It is Wednesday, March 27th, 2024, and let's go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Stacy, I think we need to adopt the agenda first.
I move that the Board of Education adopt the agenda as posted.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Luke, do we have any public participation? Okay. So, Dr. Patel.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I hope everybody had a great spring break. I can't believe we're into the fourth quarter. It's a mad rush to the summertime. So hopefully everyone got some time to relax and rejuvenate. So a couple of highlights I do want to make that occurred actually during spring break. So I always like to start off by recognizing some of our students. The first is our Vivace and Vibravo students. They actually went to Louisville, Kentucky, and they placed second in the National Orchestra Festival. And they are actually the youngest members in a group to play in the history of this program, because we have from 5th graders and 6th and 7th graders attended this. So very proud of them for their dedication, hard work. A lot of planning went behind this. So I do want to thank all the staff members that were involved with this as well. So huge congratulations to them. And then also during spring break, we had our second annual HBCU tour. We had one last year, if you can recall, and I wanted to thank the Clayton Education Foundation, actually, for helping fund this event. And what's really neat about it is we have 16 students that went this year, juniors and, juniors and sophomores. And what's really neat is from last year, the students that went, 2 of them this year have committed to 2 of the universities from the tour that they went to. So very happy about that, and I wanted to thank again the foundation for helping make sure that we have this opportunity for our students. And then last night, many of you were there for the PTO candidate forum, and I wanted to make sure I thank the PTO Council, because this, again, there's a lot of planning that goes into this. They created the website, they did a lot of the promoting for this event, and we had a great turnout. So I wanted to thank the PTO for giving our community an opportunity to get to know our candidates more. And so that went off really well as well. And I know I got quite a few emails and questions about people who couldn't attend and wanted to see it. And so we did record it, and it can be found on the PTO site. And there's like a card that went out in the mail for everyone that should have the website on there as well. So it's a YouTube link, and it was all recorded in case somebody wanted to watch that. And then tonight, we're gonna have 3 presentations. We have our annual assessment report that Dr. Garganigo and the building principals will be presenting. They'll share our state data results about that, and then they'll talk a little bit about EduClimber, the data visualization tool that we've started to use to really identify each student and where they are on their learning trajectory. And then the building principals will talk about what they're doing in their individual buildings to make sure that our students are successful. So they'll share a little bit of their journey as well. And then we have our counseling update, and then we also have our social work department who's gonna be here to give an update for that as well. And thank you, Jason is gonna be here as our curriculum coordinator as well to be a part of that. And then last but not least, we did not do a recognizing our own. This, if you didn't notice, we didn't start off with that because I wanna recognize our school board. So March is National School Board Month, and so with us having our board meeting today, I thought we'd take a few moments, and Luke, if you could click that for me, we could have a few moments just to thank you for everything you do. In front of you, you'll see a little, well, some of you put it behind you because there's a lot. In front of you, you'll see some gifts from all of our schools. They wanted to donate that to you and just show you their appreciation for what you do for our school district. You can also see some cards and banners that the kids made around, and we really want to thank you for all of the time that you spend for us. I know it's all voluntary, and it's a lot, and a lot of it is time away from your families. You make the tough decisions. You have to make sure that you're moving the district in the right direction. And I think what makes this board really strong is that you have your own perspectives, you have your own areas of passion, but you are committed to common goals. And that is focused on students and moving the district in the right direction. So really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and personally thank you for all the support you've given me and the belief you have in me, and you also challenge me. So I really appreciate that. Then also, I wanted to give a special thanks to Amy, because this is Amy's last board meeting. Amy has been with us for 9 years. That equates, Amy, to about 162 board meetings, which equates to roughly 650 hours in just school board meetings. So that does not count for the community engagement forums, the town hall forums, the homecoming parades, the conferences that you do, the MSBA training, that's not included in all that. But I just want to thank you, Amy, personally, because you have, the past 3 years is just being here as a board president, you have really helped me grow, and you've challenged me and supported me and believed in me. So I wanted to thank you for that. And I'm going to hand it off to Stacy, because I know Stacy wanted to say a few words as well.
Thank you. I apologize, Amy, that I'm going to read this. On behalf of the board, Amy, it's hard to believe this is your last meeting after 9 years of service on the board. You've been an incredibly thoughtful, supportive, respectable, and collaborative leader, not to mention a friend to all of us. You have shown us that a strong leader does not necessarily need to make a loud presence, but rather be an active listener above all else. It is obvious to all of us who have served with you that you make every decision with our students' best interests at the forefront of your mind and only with the best of intentions. You have led us through rewarding, exciting, and yes, difficult times, but all with professionalism and integrity. I know I speak for all of us when I say we also appreciate your fun and self-deprecating sense of humor. And I'm not sure board meetings will be the same without watching you, as I just did tonight. At the start of every meeting, look around over each shoulder, unsure of where the flag is, to say the pledge, which it hasn't moved in years, but it always makes me giggle, and I will miss that lighthearted start to every meeting, which brings me a smile every time. Some of our best memories as a board with you are not even at the board table, but rather when we can get together socially and further develop our real friendships, which I know you will continue with each of us. Being a school board member, and certainly being the president of the school board, is often a thankless job and certainly time-consuming. We hope you and your family and your boss will enjoy your newfound free time. Thank you for all you've done to improve the experiences of our students. Thank you for all you have done to support our teachers and all the staff of the district. Thank you for all you've done to inspire each one of us on the board. And thank you for all you've done to support the entire Clayton community. We will miss seeing you at least twice a month. Thank you. And we have some gifts for you, which you can open later. We all made a donation to the Clayton Education Foundation in your honor. We have a box of goodies here, and we have a vase with flowers for you too. You're welcome.
I actually did not prepare anything to say, but thank you, everybody. It's been a really fun 9 years. I will miss all of you so much. I know I've told all of you this before, but I truly believe that this board is tremendous, and the group of people we have is, each of you brings something different to the board, and that's what makes us a whole. So I will miss everybody so much, but I will be around on the ACLU board.
Great.
Doing my thing there. But thank you, everybody, for the gifts. Thank you, Nisha, for being a friend, our superintendent. It's been fun.
Thank you. So I also wanted to share and read a few cards that our kids made for the board. And so I'm going to start with this first one. It says, Miss Rubin. Dear Miss Rubin, you are my favorite school board president. I love learning the social studies curriculum. The time and effort you put in this is incredible. You make outstanding decisions. You are so caring. I appreciate everything you do for the district. You're awesome. It's from William.
I love it. Do I get to keep that?
You absolutely may. This one is from John to Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson, dear Mr. Wilson, thank you for working with the school board. Every bit helps. Thank you. Could you pass that to Mr. Wilson? This one is thank you, thank you, thank you. Dear Miss Rubin, I really love the curriculum. You've obviously worked very hard. And no, I get teached. You are such a good president. You make such good plans. Thank you, from Bernie. Bernie. This one is adorable. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hurst. Thank you for being our treasurer and making sure our money is being stored and going to the right things. I hope you have a successful rest of your life.
Oh my gosh. And me too. And she can count to 10.
She can count to 10.
Most importantly.
That's true. And then this is entire school board from sixth grader, Alexandra. Thank you for everything you do for my school. I wanted to write a thank you letter and ask a question. And thank you for giving me 3 snow days this year and making decisions so I can have a good education. My question, could you make the amount of school days go down by 15? There we go.
Ask him if he wants to join the calendar
Committee. Calendar committee. Well, I just wanted to share a few of those adorable cards from our students as well to just show you appreciation from them. And then last but not least, they actually have a video to show you guys.
We now go live to Clayton, where a special session of the School District of Clayton's Board of Education is underway.
Welcome, everyone, to the Clayton Board of Education meeting. We are now in session. The first order of business is to approve the minutes from our last meeting. Mr. Chen, please read the minutes.
Yes, Penelope. At our last meeting, we approved the motion to have chocolate milk available to students all day. I voted to make Friday Wear Your Clothes Backwards Day.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chen. Evelyn, please tell us what the first item on tonight's agenda is.
Yes, Penelope. The first thing to discuss this evening is Glenridge Elementary's proposal to extend recess by an extra 30 minutes.
I believe we owe it to our students, but is it enough?
The data says that students like recess, so I say we increase it to an hour.
That is a great idea. Let's vote. Those in favor of extending recess, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye. That settles it. What is next?
The next item is Wydown Middle School thinks we should not allow homework in schools anymore. I agree!
I think so too, but what are the students saying about it?
I make a motion that homework should not be allowed at any school. Can I have a second? Second!
All those in favor, raise your hands.
Aye!
Great. Since this meeting has gone way too long, Evelyn, can you please tell us what we will be doing in our next meeting?
Sure. At our next meeting, it looks like we'll be voting on running in the halls and most importantly...
Thank you, board members!
So thank you truly from on behalf of all of us for everything that you do. All right, Mohini, I'm gonna hand it to you.
After meeting with elementary schoolers a bunch, it's very accurate of the power. I hope everyone had a great spring break. Students definitely did. It's been a little rough getting back these last couple days as everyone is trying to, focus back in on learning and, try our hardest to end the year strong. In all classes, students agree that teachers are really trying to create a schedule to make sure they can finish and review curriculums before AP tests or final, just so that everyone's ready for the next year. And so students are really seeing the end in sight, and especially the juniors or seniors are ready to go on summer break. And so a little update from Clayton, we moved towards video announcements, which it's instead of going over the intercom, now you see two individuals from the Greyhound News Network who present information about clubs and new aspects. Usually over the intercom, everyone really just tunes it out. And so now everyone watches it, looks at the information, and it's going to be a really cool new way to, share, opportunities with the entire student body. Because, only in the classes where the teacher remembers to put it on. But other than that, the video announcements I think they're bringing it back from it used to be. So yeah, that's like a new update at Clayton High School. And then finally with Wydown, I've visited Wydown twice to talk to teachers and students. And the most recent time we looked at, their relationship with teachers and counselors and their preparedness for high school. And I reported those concerns back in December, I think. And recently they even actually reached out to me because they wanted to hold another session with the Student Voice Committee, where basically they have a lot of proposals for change. And unlike the elementary schoolers who I've talked to, the middle schoolers are a lot more realistic and a lot more excited to see change. And I know especially now when we're looking at students who are going to change the student body and looking for a new student rep, it's really excited to see that kids believe that change can be made in the district and are really reaching out in order to do so. And so I'm really excited to continue important discussions with both the middle school and the elementary schools in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Okay, so are we good? Okay, so we are going to move on to our annual assessment reports. I'm going to invite Milena and our fabulous principals up.
Good evening. So I'd first like to introduce our team and thank all of them for the work that they do. I report out a lot of information, but they're doing the heavy lifting in the buildings. So starting over here, Yorba Johnson McQuarrie is our instructional coordinator at Glenridge, and she's sitting in for Dr. Murdoch. Patrick Fisher, our principal at Merrimack. Jennifer Martin, our principal at Captain. Jamie Jordan, principal at Wydown. Dan Kaczewski, principal at the high school. So thank you all. Oh, Jamie's back. So tonight, obviously the report that I provided to you is pretty comprehensive. It's a lot of information. And so trying to figure out what we would focus on tonight with you, the written report is going to have a lot more information than what I'm going to present verbally here. What I think is the most important for us to do is highlight the information that's generally shared publicly and to give some explanation to that information. And then, like Nisha shared, we'll talk a little bit about EduClimber, which is our data visualization tool that has helped us do some of our work at the ground level. And then each of the building principals will share some information specific to their building, really specific to how do we use these data to influence our work on a daily basis. So the annual performance report comes out, and so the Missouri School Improvement Program is currently in its 6th cycle. This is the 2nd year of the 6th cycle, so it's the first time in a long time that we've been able to compare data from year to year. while local data informs our practice more frequently, state data is what's public, it's on our data dashboard, and it's what DESE reports and ultimately will use for our accreditation. So school districts currently, because of the move into the 6th cycle of MSIP, are not currently like receiving official accreditation information. That'll start next year in the 3rd year. So the way that MSIP 6 is different from MSIP 6.5 is that we have about 30% of our points are coming from what they are calling continuous improvement. And so the continuous improvement includes such things as a school district having a strategic plan, so a comprehensive school improvement plan that they're using to inform their practice, that we're using culture and climate surveys to determine how well we're doing, and that we're serving students, staff, and parents within the community. The Success Ready Students pieces are that we're giving kindergarten readiness assessments to at least 95% of our students, that we're giving individual career and academic plans starting in 8th grade that go through the high school to at least 95% of our students, and then that our attendance is that 90% of our students are in attendance 90% of the time. And then the other pieces are required documentation kinds of things. So they're required things from us, and so we're getting minimal points for those pieces. This constitutes then 30% of our overall points. Performance then, which is the part that I think you all are more interested in, is the part that constitutes 70% of our score. So throughout this presentation and throughout the report, I'm using the MAP Performance Index as the way to report those scores. If you remember back with, all of you have been around for a while, when I presented during MSIP 5, students would receive a static score for below basic, basic, proficient, and advanced. The shift to MSIP 6 allows students to be rewarded for progress within an achievement band. So if they're scoring, if they're making progress but they're still below basic, but they're higher within the band of below basic, then they're going to fall with more points. And so that is benefiting our students as a whole. And so it's a way of allowing students to show progress without necessarily moving between achievement levels. So when we look at our overall population, the MPI is a range from 100 to 500, and the target from the state, they want us to be within the 400 to 500 range. And so when you look at our overall achievement for our student population, you'll see that we're well within, in all content areas in all schools, we're well within that 400 to 500 range. So we see that we're overall doing quite well. Our student group, if you remember, the student group includes Black African American students, Hispanic students, those who qualify for EL services, those who qualify for special education services, and then those students who are part of the federal lunch program. The ideal is for this population's scores to be the same as our total population scores. There is some within the state, they give a little bit of leeway with that to say that your target is somewhere within the 365 to 400 or to 500 range, but the goal being that this population represents the same as your total population. So as a district, we are surpassing where that target range starts in all areas. And so we see that we're doing well. There continues to be a gap between our total population and our student group scores. So we are not yet at that place where the delta is 0 for those scores. Like I said, because this is the second year of MSIP 6, it's the first year that we can compare data between years. And so this is the first time we've been able to do this for a long time. So the way that I planned these charts sort of for ease of reading was anything that's a blue is a positive increase. Anything that's a red is a negative difference. And so when you look at this overall, what you see is that between 2022 and 2023, in most content areas, in most schools, you will see an increase. There's a couple places where you don't see that. One of them I want to highlight is the math piece. When we did the math review with you 2 years ago, one of the things that we talked about, and then I sent another memo last year about this, was that we made some decisions about realigning our curriculum to the standards, and we knew in doing that we were going to have a year or two where the data was going to look a little bit off for us because we were realigning where we were teaching standards. And so it wasn't necessarily aligned to where the kids were tested. And so that's what you see here. The other piece that I talked about with math in that meeting, as well as in the memo to you all, was the change in testing 8th graders on the end of course exam. So the state changed their rules about when to test end of course. It used to be that the district made the decision as to when to do the end of course assessment. And we had our Algebra 1 standards spread out through 3 courses. Now the state has changed that to say that you test the EOC at the time of the name designation of the course. So we had a course in 8th grade called Challenge Algebra. So that meant that those students then took the Algebra 1 EOC. And so our 8th grade algebra scores then are separated out by 8th grade students who are not in Challenge Algebra taking the 8th grade assessment, and then the Challenge Algebra students taking the Algebra 1 EOC. What that also does for us then is that means that those students who took an Algebra 1 EOC in the middle school will now have to take a second math EOC at the high school, so they'll end up taking the Algebra 2 assessment at the high school. The reason why we never did that in the past was because we believed that the EOC was a high school assessment, and it really didn't benefit our students to take one in the middle school and then have to take a different one at the high school. We now sort of don't have that choice, and so we'll continue down that path. But so that's a piece there. And then the social studies piece, it's sort of a nominal difference. So there isn't, I will say that when I look at these MPI scores, no one has told me like, here's the number, here's the magic number that you should look at. But when I look at these, when I get the data in, if I see a difference of 5 on the positive side or on the negative side, that gives us an opportunity to say, let's dig deeper into the data and look at it and try to get a better understanding of what's there. So that's a Milena Garganigo number decision. That's not like a state told us that 5 is significant. That's just where I feel like there's significance for us to dig into. So when you look at the student group population, this is the chart that I think we as a team maybe are most proud of. Is that there's a lot of blue on this chart. And I think in previous years, we have not seen the same kind of celebration. And so we're excited to see that the work that we're doing within the buildings, we're starting to see some positive increase with our student group population. When we look then at the data broken down by race, and I'm going to go through these, you all have these within the report. I'm going to go through these a little bit quickly. I have them by race, and then I have them by students who are receiving special education services. You're seeing a lot of the same kind of information, a lot of blue, some instances of red that are just things that as we start to dig into data in the building, we start to look at it, and then we start to triangulate it with our local assessments that inform our practice on a more frequent basis. So that's English language arts. This is math. So we spent some time talking about math and that piece at Y Down. Science. And then social studies. And social studies is the only time that we assess social studies is at the high school. And then this is our students receiving special education services, a similar kind of pattern of more prevalence of blue, but instances of red where we need to spend some time digging into those data pieces. So after we talk about status, and one of the things that I think is oftentimes really confusing with the state is they also use this term growth. So like I just showed you a whole bunch of charts that look like we're making growth. Because when you compare year 1 to year 2, we are seeing positive increases in a lot of instances. Growth is not just the difference between the 22-23 assessments. The way that the state, and I'm going to try to explain this well, the way that the state determines growth is by using the Missouri Growth Model, which is a model that's developed by economists at Mizzou. And the way that they do this, and they've done this for years with us for elementary through middle school, so grades 4 through 8, if a student took a test in grade 3, say for example, they took the English Language Arts test in grade 3, then they will determine a predicted score for that child for grade 4. And so growth is then determined on how close they are to that predicted score. So whether they're above it, below it, or whatever, that's how we get our points. There are other things that factor into the Missouri Growth Model that we are not totally aware of everything that factors into that. There's some pieces about movement of students. There's some pieces about marginalized populations, et cetera, that factor in that. And we do not have any sort of like technical report that gives us all of those pieces. The grades 4 through 8, if there isn't a 3rd grade score and a student has a 4th grade score, then they don't factor into the growth model. All of that makes sense to us. That's been the same for MSIP 5. It's the same for MSIP 6. What became new this year was the addition of the end of course exams at the high school. So for the first time this year, they used the end of course exams at the high school in all 4 content areas to determine a predicted score. So what they're using for the predicted score for the high school tests is an 8th grade MAP score in any content area. So for social studies, you don't have an 8th grade social studies assessment, so they're using math, ELA, and science to determine the predicted score. So this is new for all of us, like within the state. And so the way that they take your actual score, and your residual is your actual score minus your predicted score. And then if that's positive or bigger than what they anticipated, you get more points for that. And if it's smaller, then you're receiving fewer points for that. So a couple things that are a little counterintuitive for us are the fact that those assessments are now no longer, they don't have to be in consecutive years because we're using 8th grade assessments. And then the second piece is that they don't have to be in the same content area. So they're using, for science, they're using ELA and math. For social studies, they're using ELA and math. That's a little counterintuitive for us. So the other piece, so then this is our overall total population of like when you look at the growth model, how things are falling out. And you'll notice that you have 2 areas where significantly where we're below average. I've already talked about the math piece at Wydown, so we knew to anticipate that. We did not know initially to anticipate the science at the high school. And so the reason why that came through, and the reason why the below average is for high school and district is because the only science assessment that they're using in the growth model this year is the high school EOC. Next year, they'll use the 5th grade and the 8th grade science tests also. But so that was a surprise to us. And so when I dug in deeper with this, this is where it gets really complicated. When I dug in deeper with this, what we found out is that we traditionally test biology in 11th grade. A lot of school districts teach biology in 9th grade. We test biology in 11th grade because we teach it in 11th grade. We test government in 11th grade. The students last year who were in 11th grade, when they were in 8th grade, it was the COVID year that we did not test them. And so their scores, so we tested 227 students in biology. Only 15 students factored into our growth score. So those 15 students represent seniors who we're responsible for testing all students before they graduate. We grabbed those seniors before they graduated. They happened to have an 8th grade score because they were the year before COVID and that. So this is a 1-year anomaly. We are one of a few districts that this is affecting because of our sequence in science. So other districts, it's not affecting in the same way because they test science, generally test science in 9th grade. Because we're a physics first district, this is why this has had an impact on us. You see the same impact, but not to the same extent with government, that we tested 220 students, but only 56 of those students factored in. So when you think about that, a population of 15 students can have, like, there's not a lot to draw from there to determine whether they made their predicted growth or not. And so I've had conversation with the state about this. I haven't gotten a lot of response from the state. I've expressed my opinion on it, but I haven't gotten a lot of response. But I feel like I owe it to you to explain to you why I feel like this is such an anomaly and why I don't anticipate that it's going to be an issue moving forward, because next year's group, so this year's group that we're testing, will have 8th grade scores. Okay. So what do we do with all this data and all this information? So one of the things we talked earlier with you in the year about EduClimber, and so this is a new tool that we brought into the district this year. And one of the things that we have as a goal as a team is to know our students well as learners and have a plan for all of our learners, especially those who aren't yet meeting grade level expectations. And so that is a goal that we as a team share. And so we really want to make sure that we can name those students and that we can have a plan in place for them. And so EduClimber has become a tool that has been really helpful to us in being able to track information and data in this way. So like I said, it's a data visualization tool. It allows us to look at patterns. And it's what we use as a data warehouse. So anything, when you approve the assessment matrix in May, anything that's on the assessment matrix now, we are entering in as data into EduClimber. So my team does that. And so that includes local data. So it includes grades, it includes attendance, it includes some of our local assessments that we're using. It's a tool that we can use for communication between teachers, and it's a tool that we can use to generate some important information to share with families. So all of you at some point, if you have children who are K through 8, or K through 10 actually, have received a report out of EduClimber from us when your students were tested on FAST. This year, so that's a way for us to do things. It's also a longitudinal data tracking system, so we can track cohorts of students, we can track individual students over time, and we can use that data collection for identification for programming. So when you think about like our identification for our gifted programming or those types of things, we're using this tool to help us keep track of all those data and all that information. So what does that look like? So everything that I'm about to present to you is in top secret mode so that I can maintain the anonymity of our students. If I was not in top secret mode, all of those little dots would be little faces of our students. And so one of the things that's really cool about this is that it keeps the student in the front of our conversation. So everything that we're looking at, we can see the faces of our students. So this is like a big picture view of like, when we first enter information or data into the system, what's our first way of looking at, like, how many students do we have that are falling within a range that we need to talk about? So if we need to grab and talk about all of these students who are in the below basic range, how many students are we talking about at that point? This is all elementary students, so 52 of our entire elementary population, 52 students are falling in the below basic range. I can then click on each of those students to get their individual information. But so the team can start to talk very specifically, very quickly about individual students and groups of students. From a teacher level or from a classroom level, I can pull spreadsheets very like at the click of a button. I can pull a spreadsheet, and our team has set up the system in a way that the color coding means something to everyone in the district. So a red means we should be having serious conversation. A yellow means we might need to be having some conversation. A green means we're in a good place, and a blue means we're at the highest place that we can be for right now. So it's not important for the teachers to know exactly what each of those scores means. The color coding is a good, easy way to look at this. So as a teacher, I can look at this spreadsheet in two ways. I can look at it as an individual student, which is a line, to say, how is this child doing across the board? Or I can look at it as an assessment, which is a column, to say, how is my class doing overall? And to start to be able to have conversations within our teams about what those things look like. We also can use the system to group students, and so you'll see that the third column in, so the box is then the student number, and then there's a third column. That's a way of we tag students. So we say these students fall into this particular group of students. We can grab that group and follow that group if we put an intervention in place or whatever, and it's very quick and easy for us to grab the information on just that smaller group of students. So this is what a teacher could look at, or a principal could look at with a classroom or a grade level. And then this is an individual student profile. So when I look at the individual student profile, you'll notice on the left-hand side, there's a lot of demographic information. Across the top, there are tiles that talk about attendance. They talk about whether there are things that we have created within the system, so tags or forms that we've created in the system that inform us about this child. And then the tiles across the thing are all assessments that they have taken this year. And then the middle piece is, and this is the newest piece for us, is if a child is in an intervention, we're now keeping track of what the intervention is, and we're progress monitoring that intervention. And so the last piece is, I'm going to skip it. This piece is for an individual student, their progress monitoring. So to say, we've identified this child as having to do some work on word blending. We put a plan in place with instruction, and then weekly we're assessing that student to see how they're doing. So the blue up and down line is the child's data, the green line is the goal line. So that tells us how close we are to the student's goal. The other thing that we can do with the system is set up a threshold. And so this allows us that anytime we give an assessment, we tell the system, we want you to grab all students who fall within this threshold. So this one is anyone who falls within the 31st to the 49th percentile in reading. We say we want to know how many students in the school that is, and then we can make the threshold tag the student to say that they're doing that, create a form for the student that allows us to create an individualized plan, and inform the teachers, the principals, the counselors, whoever needs to be informed of what's going on with that child. And it also allows us to see like patterns of who's falling within that threshold. So we can do it at the individual level or at the bigger scale level. So this tool really has become pretty integral to our work this year. Our goal this year has been for this team to have a really good understanding of what's going on with the tool and what the capabilities of it are. Our goal next year then is to start to roll it out more thoroughly with the teachers. So it oftentimes what'll happen in a meeting is one of us will bring up the data and talk through it with the teachers, because the lift to get people into the system is a pretty big lift. And we wanted our team to be really versed with it before we start to roll it out to the teachers being able to, they can interact with it now, but they haven't necessarily been trained with that piece. But I think all of us are in a pretty solid place with it. So now what I wanted to do is shift over to the principals being able to share with you their stories, because these pieces of data are so big picture and don't necessarily affect our day-to-day interactions with students. And so I wanted the principals to be able to share from their lens the story of their school. Each of them is going to do it through a little bit of a different part of our work, but all of it comprehensively will tell you the story of what we're using data and information for. So Dr. Martin's going to start.
Good evening, everybody. Can you advance or hand me the clicker? Thank you. That's okay. All right. I'm first going to start with one of my favorite quotes by Mike Matos, who is a leading researcher in the work of professional learning communities. And what this quote is a journey does not begin with the first step. Instead, it first begins by facing in the right direction. And so we have worked really, really hard in all of our time here in Clayton. And we are really, truly at a point where you can see by that data, we are facing in the right direction and we're moving forward. Professional learning communities are an ongoing process in which educators work collaboratively in reoccurring cycles of collective inquiry to achieve better results for the students that they serve. A key component of this improved learning for all of our students is the way that we see our role in continuous job-embedded learning for our educators is directly impacting the results of the outcome of our students. I'm going to walk you through 4 pictures here, and these 4 pictures represent the 4 guiding questions that we use to guide our work through PLC work. The first picture you see there is Captain's 5th grade team and our math specialist, Dr. Harger, and they're gathering together to really respond to the first question of the PLC cycle, which is what do we want our students to know and be able to do? And while that might seem pretty simple, When you are working in a unit with sometimes 17 standards that all seem really important, having a conversation to ensure you're all on the same page and that you're unpacking and really truly understanding those standards in the same way is crucial. The other thing that we can do during that time is really tease out what is most important for kids to know. And by that I mean, if they don't master that particular skill, then they move forward in their learning, they're going to have lagging skills or gaps in their learning. So we have to get really clear on what standards are essential for kids to know and achieve mastery on, and what standards are nice for students to know and have exposure to, because they're going to get other opportunities later in their education to really reinforce those skills. So our teams come together and they meet in the areas of communication arts, so both reading and literacy and phonics, and also in math. And so we prioritize our work based on what our students' needs are. The second question that we work to achieve is really determining how will we know that our students have understood it? How will they demonstrate mastery? And that might look different than just your standardized tests that we just talked about. So teachers will talk a lot about what does the end of unit assessment look like before they ever begin teaching the very first lesson of the unit. That helps this team come together with a very clear picture of what that outcome is and how we're going to ensure kids are really truly meeting it. We use an assessment cycle that starts frequently with a pre-assessment that helps us understand what prerequisite skills our students are coming to us with, and if there are any particular skills maybe we need to shore up or freshen up before the unit starts. We also use something called common formative assessments, which are checkpoints throughout the unit. And the reason that they're called common formative is because the team comes back together and they talk about that. Teachers might use their own formative assessments just as a way of checking the learning and making sure students are progressing. But a couple times throughout that unit, the team that is a PLC will commit to coming back together, sharing that common data, and really monitoring how students are progressing throughout that unit. That is so important because if students aren't getting it, there's still time within the unit, within the learning, for us to respond and to approach this differently. If we get to the end of the unit, oftentimes the next unit brings new standards that they need to master. So the most important opportunity is for our kids to be able to demonstrate their learning throughout the unit so teachers can provide the right feedback and respond and support them accordingly. And then the end of that assessment cycle is that summative assessment. Sometimes we consider that autopsy data because the unit has stopped at that moment in time. But it is important for us to look at that with the sense of, did every student reach that milestone? And if they haven't demonstrated mastery on those essential skills, then we get an opportunity to look at how we're going to use our multi-tiered system of supports to continue to address that skill, because we know it's going to be important for students coming forward. We answer 2 more questions through the process of unpacking a unit and really preparing for instruction. This picture represents what will we do for students, or how will we empower them if we teach that skill, but they just didn't get it. So not every child learns to walk at the same time. We know that. Not every child is going to master a learning standard at the same time. Students often need multiple approaches to learning, and they need multiple opportunities to see that learning and interact with it in a different way. As the experts who have taught this grade level or this content for many years, we can anticipate what some of those hang-ups might be for students because we've experienced those with other students before them. So taking time to really plan, when a student gets to this particular challenge, how will we collectively address this concern so that students get to that finish line at the same place at the same time? We want to make sure that we are responding within that cycle to ensure that success. And the last picture represents the 4th question, which is, what do we do when students come to us and they already know it? And so we have a responsibility to grow all students. So if they're coming into this unit and they've already mastered all of these skills and they've demonstrated their proficiency, what will we be doing to ensure that those students have an authentic learning experience and they're not just given some additional packets or busy work to kind of keep them busy? And maybe a little bit of challenge. We want to make sure it's rich and it's rigorous challenge, and that every single child is growing throughout the process that we love to call PLCs. So I'll hand this off to Dan.
Good evening. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we use end of course exam data to inform planning and instruction. And one of the charges that we've given our PLC groups this year is to really look at data. And so there has historically been a little bit of an element of we get together and plan, but what student data are we really looking at? And one of the challenges of the end of course exams at the high school course is that a student only takes it once while they're in the high school. So for longitudinal data for an individual student is not particularly useful, but what it is useful for is looking at the item analysis to look at curricular alignment with state standards and how our curriculum aligns. And it also looking at the types of questions that are being asked on the exam. As Milena mentioned earlier, we test in algebra, biology, government, and English too. And so one of the things that we did this year is really charged these respective PLC groups to really dig into the end of course exam data and look for those trends, look for those patterns to see how our curriculum aligns with the state standards and how we can help our students do the best they can. This was particularly useful in biology this year. And that's actually the biology group up there on the screen, and because one of the things that we've historically in our science program or in the biology program, we rewrote our curriculum based on the next generation science standards several years ago. At least initially, the next generation science standards were not the same as the Missouri Show Me standards, and there was a feeling that the MTSS standards were better than the Missouri standards, and so that created a level of I'll call it skepticism for the value of the biology end of course exam. So the group really dug into the data this year. Like I said, that was the charge they were given. What they learned pretty quickly was that the new Missouri Show Me standards are aligned with the MTSS standards, so that was good news. But one of the things that they recognized was our kids didn't do particularly well on the ecology questions actually that were in the exam. And it's a pretty significant portion of the exam. Well, upon further review, looking at when we cover the ecology material and when we give the exam, we cover ecology generally in late April and early May. That is after the exam is given each year. So it's understandable to see why our kids weren't doing as well as they possibly could based on the timing of the test. So this has allowed our team to get together to look at how they when they present certain material and also look at the item analysis on the different types of questions to help better prepare our kids in the future. So as a result, they've made adjustments to our timelines and our curriculum sequence to make sure that this material is covered prior to giving the exam. So hopefully we'll see a change here in the near future when we give the exam. But the point of this is too that we're making this a regular part of our practice, and each of these respective groups will continue to do this on an annual basis and regularly look at the item analysis for our kids to kind of inform us on what changes we need to make, not only to our timelines, but then also to any curricular strands to make sure that we are aligned with these state standards.
So I'm going to talk a little bit I'm going to talk a little bit about MTSS and then specifically what we're doing at Whiteown. So MTSS is another educational acronym, and this one means, and Jen mentioned it earlier, but multi-tiered system of support. And as you can see from the upside down triangle, it's based on the PLC work of the 4 questions that Jen mentioned, but specifically looking at a data-informed framework that helps us ensure that all kids are getting what they need both for academics and then also socio-emotional support. So tier 1 is sort of your core curriculum and learning essentials, what you would see in a classroom when you walked in a classroom setting. Tier 2 is more interventions that target a specific skill deficit. I think one of the ones we talked about was like inferencing or something that comes up very specifically for some students, and you identify that by assessing that specific skill. And then the tier 3 is sort of outside of the classroom setting. That's a prolonged period of intervention more by a content specialist, like you would think of a reading or a math specialist. So those are the 3 tiers when you're thinking of the MTSS. So at Y Down, where we really looked is we know as a building and honestly as a district, our teachers are excellent in their craft at tier 1. They're really working at that. And a lot of our professional learning around empowerment and different things that we've done has been a lot of work around that tier 1. At the secondary level, tier 2 is pretty hard. Mostly because elementary teachers are trained more on how to do tier 2 within their classroom. You think of like a circle table with a small group of kids sitting or groups flexing in and out. At the secondary level, teachers aren't necessarily trained at that initially, and so it's a lot of things that we're doing to work in how do you do this when you're having a classroom of 25 students, and how do you make sure kids don't feel one way or another when they're pulled in different groups, and so it's a little bit trickier. So that's where we decided to focus our professional learning at this year. Over the summer, we worked with our math and literacy coordinators and our department chairs at Y Down to really look at the alignment of our full year of professional learning, both content and building days, to really capitalize. And we focused really on math and with literacy because those have the most grounded assessments and a good place to start. So we had an assessment matrix already set. We could do something in the fall. It would be assessed again in the spring. We could measure things throughout with our own classroom data and have some ideas. So that's where we started our work. We also identified through these assessments the students that scored below the 30th percentile, and they became our spotlight students. So essentially each quarter, our math and literacy teachers come together and they are reporting out about where these students are doing. And we started off by talking about, and I think Melina talks about this personalized process, and we're planning for them individually. So we want to know the whole student. So on this massive spreadsheet, it has grades, but it also has, what interventions we're trying, what are the skill deficits, but also who are they as a learner? What other things do we know about them? All these kinds of big projects and ideas about each of these students. And so each quarter, we come back together and the teachers will bring student work and they'll talk about the students and what they're doing. And so for example, Mr. Mayasaka is working with an 8th grade group of boys and really looking at that group of boys, specifically looking at critical reading and writing. And he's working with them in a small group, not only within his classes, but also in our Learning Center support classes. And the teachers all had different ways that they were coming about working with these different kids because each individual kids needs something different. But the day-to-days have been something that's been really great because it's sort of a shared accountability. And you also know, in Clayton and specifically at Y Down, when you give teachers a charge to really do what they can for kids and own those kids' success and those pieces, they really go above and beyond. So that's what we did.
So I've been tasked with telling the story of our last 3.5 semesters at Glenridge Elementary School as we work to deepen our understanding of PLCs and add that layer of MTSS. Really thinking about how those systems work together, as these lovely individuals have already cited, how they work together to really bring about student success. So in thinking about that, this story has chapters, just to prep you in advance. Chapter 1. We worked to establish collaborative teams. So at the beginning of last year, really digging into that PLC process. So I'm going to tell this story through the lens of our 3rd grade team. In that time, our team has been teaching for a very long time. I'd say collectively, they have more than 100 years of service. So they know the PLC process, they've used it in the past, but our goal last year was really to deepen that collective efficacy. When we bring the team together, how do they work together and collaborate for the good of all the students, not just on that individual, my classes versus your class? So they focused on phonics last year and had tremendous growth. But as a system, we noticed that we had a learning gap for our adults, and that was specifically in the area of MTSS. So when we were thinking about how to respond to our students who were not yet making that growth, how did we think about, we had to think about how could we better understand Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports for our students. So we sent 2 teams of teachers and specialists to RTI, which is another acronym that basically is MTSS, training last year, so in the 2nd semester of last year. And in that time, our teams were able to deepen their understanding of Tier 1 instruction and what that means for all of our students. So often we had some gatekeeping that was happening. If we noticed that students needed some support from earlier or previous years, we didn't always corner away or ensure that they had that tier 1 time so that they were learning the standards from their current year. Instead, we'd say, oh, you need this intervention. It's okay if you miss out on that. That only increased our gaps in those students' learning. So we were very intentional after coming back to say, how can we revamp, as an elementary team, our schedule in order to maximize that opportunity for tier 1 time? And then the other piece that really came out of that was the sense of understanding of collective efficacy around unpacking our standards. Oftentimes, we would say, oh yeah, these are the important standards. We all agree. Walk away, do the thing in the classroom. Coming back together and really sitting down and making sure that we have that common understanding so that when we're assessing those standards, we are all looking for the same thing and the same level of expectation for our students. So, as you can see from that graphic, really thinking about how that PLC question 3 and that PLC question 4 could help us to better address the learning of our students. Okay, so I missed chapter 2. It's okay. It had a cool name too, but we'll go on to chapter 3. I said everything in chapter 2. Coaching teams and unleashing potential. So this year, starting in the 3rd semester of this cycle, or of this entire cycle for our system, we went through coaching cycles for our teams. So I, as the IC, partnered with our literacy coach to provide coaching for our PLC teams. And our 3rd grade team this time around decided to focus on summarizing, saying that this is the linchpin. If 3rd graders leave us and they can't summarize, they will not be successful moving forward. So because of all of our learning, because we were able to send so many teachers and specialists to the RTI training, we were able to really dig in deeply into our tier 2 instruction for classroom teachers and better understand how our tier 3 supports that happen outside of the classroom can also benefit our students in a more purposeful way because of that structure. Moving forward, chapter 4, we also want to make sure that we have those opportunities to look at that satellite data that Milena was talking about before. So our data teams met together and unpacked even that satellite data to say, yes, we know that our local data says this about our kids and we've put these things in place, but we'll also take the time to make sure that we're responding to our satellite data as well. So this concludes our tale. I think I made it in 3 minutes. Huzzah.
All right, so I get to be the last one to kind of share some of these things. So I'm going to try to tell this first through the context. We've heard about PLCs, we've heard about MTSS, we've heard about several of those things. So I want to kind of talk about this. One, what does this actually look like, and how might this look for one of our students? And in particular, Milena mentioned in one of her earlier slides about our goal of having a plan in place for all of those individual students who may not be meeting grade level expectations. So what does that look like? So the first, to kind of explain when we talk about MTSS, we talk about RTIs, and we talk about tiers, and we talk about those things, I think it's also sometimes helpful to have a bit of an analogy, while not maybe 100% perfect, but that we can all kind of relate to, that explains a little bit of the education, what I would say is the education ease, that language that educators speak in that maybe not everybody else does. So thinking about that pyramid, I think sometimes there's a medical analogy with some of these things. So like a universal screener, the universal screener that starts a lot of this process, or those tests, those things that you do at the beginning. If you think about your yearly physical, the blood work that you get done every year that you take to your doctor and they look at and they say, what does this mean? That's kind of a similar universal screener. Every person who might go see their gen ed doctor takes that and it tells a certain amount of information. Then you go to your tier 1. Your tier 1 is that initial first best, taking care of yourself. Are you eating the right things? Are you listening to your doctor, taking the supplements, the medicines that may be prescribed to you on a regular basis, working with your doctor to get exactly what you need? If that's happening, your blood work looks good, you're getting all those things, you're taking care of the things that need to be taken care of, you may stay in tier 1 and just continue doing what you've been doing and keep growing and learning and keep doing what you need to do as you kind of develop. If, however, something comes back on that universal screener, and it may come back and say, well, there's something off here. Maybe your cholesterol's off. Maybe your sodium's a little too high. Maybe your blood pressure's off. You may work with your tier 1 doctor, and they may say, well, you need something else. And it may be something that they can try to fix. They may try a couple of different things, or they may say, this looks really bad. We need to send you immediately to something else. So it's almost that triage. And that may send you to a tier 3 where now you're seeing a specialist, or you're having to go through some additional things with your doctor at the mill that goes beyond just that normal welfare. And that's your tier 2. So your tier 2 may be, you may be working with your general ed, your general practitioner, and they may be giving you some specific additional medicines and checking back in a little more frequently and progress monitoring that. And if you get right back where you were, then you go back to tier 1 and you stay there. But again, if you have to go see that specialist, then you may get bumped down. You may be talking to a specialist who also then is collaborating and working with your gen ed doctor and working with you. Or not gen ed doctor, but your general practitioner, with gen ed and us. But that, so that we're all kind of talking and collaborating and working together to provide that best care for those who maybe have the most needs. And so essentially that's kind of the way this pyramid works, that medical analogy that hopefully like we all can, hopefully we all get to stay in tier 1, but every once in a while things happen and you end up with a cast. So what I would say is, so in this, the other part now, we're going to use now to take that to the education world and what we've been kind of using. I wanted to do this through the lens of what we've been using this year through, first it started with the state and a law that was passed in the spring for our reading support plans, our reading success plans as we would call them. So essentially what that does is we give the students a universal screener. On that universal screener, there may be some kids that get identified in certain areas, and I'll make sure I've got all the right areas, but they may be things such as being at risk for dyslexia, performing 1 or below grade levels in reading and reading readiness, or have a formal diagnosis of dyslexia. Now, those are the criterion from the state that said any student who meets these things on the universal screeners, and they gave us a list of universal screeners that we have to make sure we use, any student that meets those is required to have a reading success plan. In Clayton, we said any student who's going to be seeing one of our reading interventionist needs to have a reading success plan. Within that plan, what you're talking about is looking at what is that intervention, communicating that intervention, making sure we have intensive reading intervention, make sure there's progress monitoring, and that utilizes the EduClimber, which Milena was talking about, that progress monitoring is tracked, is communicated with the parent. So again, this isn't done just as you wouldn't want your doctor doing things and not talking to you about it. We're not going to do things and not involve the student and the families and those things in that. And then there's also and that's that regular communication. So that's more frequent progress monitoring, it's more frequent checking. So the picture there, if you're facing the screen on the bottom left-hand corner, is one of our reading interventionists working with one student. And then the picture on the right-hand corner is that same student working with his classroom teacher. So this is the same student, and this is looking at how does that pyramid actually work where they're all working together and collaborating. This is the work of the PLCs, where we're talking about those individual teachers, where that collaboration happens, where that communication between our reading teacher, our reading specialist, our coaches are then helping to triangulate these services so that this same student is getting supports that are benefiting him in the gen ed classroom, but also in that targeted intervention. Just like you wouldn't just take the medicine and not still practice your exercise and good diet, you want all of the above. Nobody's going to say just do this and not do the other part. So we want to try to figure out how do we put all these things in place so that nothing's falling through the cracks. And that's that idea of having that reading success plan for each of these individual students. And one thing I wasn't planning on talking about this, and I just so you know, as we were talking about growth and some of that, our reading teacher right there actually just texted me as I was sitting here with 3 pictures from students that she had today that she said that she had forgot to send to me earlier, that they all wanted her to send to me, which was them holding up a chart of their growth that they've been making with her since as we've been sitting here. So these were 3 of our older students. And I think it's important to talk sometimes about our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, especially some of those 5th graders, because one of the things, and I'm sure Jamie and Dan will appreciate this, is that we would like to not create students who are looking at this intervention as an always. So how do we help them move back to where they're just able to stay in tier 1? So what is that treatment plan that we might get from the specialist? And I think any specialist would tell you their goal might be that you don't have to keep seeing them, that you can stay with just your general doctor in the same way that we would like for them to be able to get right back into that tier 1 and be able to focus on those things. And so it's how do we look at those reading success plans and look at this individual student and think about how we can put all of our services together for the benefit of that child, and kind of taking all those things that we've been talking about here at the table the whole night.
Thank you. So what questions do you all have for us?
Who wants to start?
So let's just start with the statements. I'm really excited to see a lot of blue. The blue was important going back to the data sheets. Can we go back to those sheets? Somebody? I know, Milena, you said that this is good, but you have to compare it to what the state is saying, right? But I mean, how just so you know, in our own house here, how do you feel about these numbers? Like, what are you thinking when you see these numbers? I mean, I'm pretty much all those sheets right here, but how do you feel about these numbers?
Right. So there's a lot of things that I think, like I said before, there's a lot of things that I think that we can celebrate as successes. And when you look in the report, the comparative piece to like state averages and how our students are doing, they're doing well. I think we continue, and I know that I talk about this each year, but we continue to talk about the discrepancy between our total population and our student group. But one of the things that I think is really important to celebrate about our student group is I feel like in a long time, this is the most growth that we've seen with this group of students. And I think it has a lot to do with the work that the principals and their teams are doing within their schools, specific to really knowing our students well and being able to respond to their individual needs. When you think about our strategic plan and the goal around personalized and individualized learning, that's what we were talking about. Like, we have to know all of our students well. And Jamie's got it on the board in her office because when she came back in the summer, she and I were talking and we wrote it up there, but it becomes something that's really ingrained in our work. I think all of these people who are sitting with me here can name students. Jamie calls them spotlight students in her school. Everybody has a different term, but they can name those students and they have an identified plan for them. And we have that tracked within our system. And that's all different than what we have done in the past.
I agree with everything you just said.
Yeah, it's much more systemic than I think what we've done in the past. We've always done work, but I don't think it's been as deliberate as the work that we've done in the past, like, year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah, so I just want to understand, like, how do we duplicate these things that you're doing now? I mean, these numbers, these gains are pretty significant. I'm looking at, like, let me just go to a couple here. I mean, I don't mean to hone in on the African American students here, but let's just go to this one. I see for science, like 9% gains in the district. Clayton High School is like 7%. Glen Ridge had like 21%. How did you all do 21%? What was that?
We have an amazing science.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, that's really, really good. I just want to know, you know, is it something you all did? Is it just the teacher itself? Like, what was the strategy that was implemented to see this kind of growth?
So one of the things that we did at the elementary level is we assured PLC time for our specialists. And so for the first time ever, I mean, they always came together for like curriculum meetings and they did collaborative work, but for the first time ever, we gave them dedicated time in their schedule where they could come together and they could do the same work that grade level teachers do for their students. So the power in that collective efficacy that Yorba spoke about is transcendent. And so when you're all on the same page and you're all expecting the same thing, you are having conversations that are challenging each other's thinking, and you're raising the expectations for your own instruction and the outcomes of students. And then when you have the opportunity to have the exact same goals and you're all working, even though you're in 3 different buildings, but you're all working toward a common goal, and you have deliberate opportunities to come back and say, how is it going? The power is actually in when you have somebody vulnerable enough to say it's not really going that well. And then you can engage in dialogue and conversation and say, okay, how did you get those results? And tell me more about that. What strategy did you use? And we start learning from each other as educators, and then we go back and we employ those strategies in our classrooms. So I think one of the things that would be significant, because you can see pretty nice growth in all 3 elementaries in the area of science. One of the things that we did specifically was give them dedicated time to carry out this work. The other thing that we have gotten really good at doing is looking at data by race. And I would say, several years ago, we started that process with Jamie Almazan, if you remember, that he came and worked with our district. And he really challenged our thinking. We've continued those practices and we've refined those practices. So, there was a point in time where the first, that going back to the quote I said, it's not about, your journey's not about the first step, it's about facing in the right direction. So he helped us face in the right direction, then we could take the right steps. And so it is an ongoing process where we examine our own practices through the outcomes of students, and we refine our own teaching practices to be more personalized in our approach. And the opportunity to go on in this cyclical fashion of saying, hey, which kids are getting, which kids are not, gives us the power to be able to differentiate our instruction, intervene when that's necessary, and make sure that the kids get the right touch points they need so that every single student is growing.
I think also at the elementary level, one of the things that I think we've done is the principals have come to us with some pretty innovative ideas of ways to support students, and we've said, yes, try it. And let's see what happens. So like a theory of practice being, if I put a 3rd grade teacher in a 4th grade classroom during math time to help support, my theory of practice there is having somebody who knows the math, who knows the students because they taught them last year, can have a different kind of impact on providing support to those students. So let's try it. And we've seen some of those things have great success. We've also seen things that we're like, meh, I don't know if we need to continue to do those things. But I think us being able to be in that communication of like, yeah, let's try it and see if it has an impact, and like challenging some of our old theories and our old models, and being able to say, we have a new theory of practice and we want to try something out. And we've had a lot of conversation about what that looks like. And then what I think happens then is that the secondary schools hear some of that and they say, so how can we replicate some of that within our structure? Because I think what Jamie speaks to is a secondary structure is oftentimes very challenging to think about tier 2 and tier 3. Tier 3 oftentimes means that a student is not in an elective because of when that programming happens. That's a hard decision to make for a student. And so trying to think about how can we grow and learn from what's happened with our elementary colleagues and try to implement that in a secondary setting, and just challenge some of the things that we've sort of always thought we've known.
Can I add on to that? So literally just today, I had a kindergarten teacher who was working in an area just outside the office with a group of students, and she was providing her own tier 3 instruction. And so sometimes we need, as Patrick mentioned, we need to go to a specialist for those types of supports. But one of the things that I also think is so interesting is how teachers have become empowered to work with kids in ways and capacities that I've never seen them work with children before. And so it was fun to just hear Mrs. McAllister and her students and all the work that they were doing around phonics. And at the very end, as she turned the corner, she looked at me and she said, "Thank you for this." And I said, "Thank you for what?" And she said, "Follow me." And I went into her classroom where I saw one of our 5th grade teachers, because her students were in science with Mrs. Wande, and Miss Sindelar is assigned to support in kindergarten. And she took the rest of the students and ensured they had continuity of learning so that the teacher who had the greatest skill, which in this case was Mrs. McAllister, could provide that very intensive targeted intervention, and she can do it every single day with this group of students for as long as they may need it, because we've been able to be flexible with our human resources. And I walked in to see someone who's historically in a 5th grade classroom on the floor having fun with kids and, just popping up with the biggest smile on her face as well. And so I think there's, when Melena says we've tried to get very creative in what we're doing, it's not just the creativity, but it's also making sure we have the right person and we have enough trust built up in our own community to be able to say, hey, I'm the right person for this role, or no, maybe you're the right person for this role because you connect with this student or you teach this particular skill in a way that I hadn't thought of. So being flexible with our students and seeing them as all of our kids and not just my own single classroom has made a tremendous difference.
Can this data, I know MSIP 5 was 2 years ago, and this is MSIP 6, 2 years in a row. But can this data be compared to any of the data that we've had in the past?
No, it's different assessments and it's different ways of collecting the data. But like now we're on a cycle that like this year's, when the kids are tested this year, we'll be able to compare 3 years of data.
Gotcha. So would you say this is the biggest gains you've seen in in my tenure? During my time?
Right. I'm cautious in how I answer that because that's a really difficult thing to answer because things have changed, cycles have changed. COVID came in there. Right. I don't know that I have enough like institutional memory to be able to say that.
But these are large gains. Let me ask you this question. And did COVID play a part in seeing these leaps and bound gains? Because I'm gonna say I think 10% of anything is a lot. 10% gains.
Yeah. So what COVID I think did for us, and we actually talked about this morning with the secondary principals, is I think COVID allowed us to start to think differently about how we engage in our practice. Okay. And so at a certain point we were forced to think differently. But there were some lessons that came out of COVID that I think helped us to be able to. I liked what Jen said about the flexibility with our human capital, which is really what's making, like if you think about a lot of the research, it talks about in order for kids to make significant gains, one of the most significant factors that impact that is a strong teacher, and so I think Jen's story is a really good example of us being humble enough to say, you're the right person to work with this child in order for this to happen. So I don't know that that's really an answer to your question, but
no, it's a good answer though.
But I feel like I feel like a lot of the work, it's like we're all in the same train, moving in the same direction. And I'm not sure that we necessarily felt that as a team before. Like it was often like a lot of silos, and we were trying things, and we're always trying to do right by kids. What we've noticed is being on the same train allows us then to engage in conversation. Like Jamie was talking today with me about, like she came to a meeting with the elementary instructional coordinators, and her learning coming out of that and their learning as a part of that allowed us to be a stronger system. So like we've had strong buildings and strong grade levels and strong those kinds of things, and now we're working towards being a strong system.
Gotcha. One last question, I'll let you all rock on it, but quick question about EduClimber. Yeah. So I'm excited about that. So can you talk more about that, about being able to extrapolate data like that? Because you're getting it almost in real time. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah.
It seems like real time to me. And this is what I think we talked about this back when Sean was here. We wanted something like this. And now you remember that in the conversations? So now we have it. So tell me how that works for you, and how you all feel about being able to, hone in on a student quickly and see something that might be wrong, and then go in there and be able to correct it. Tell me how that works.
Yeah. So do you all want to talk about? Like I can talk about it from a district lens all day.
I just like listening to you talk anyway. So you talk.
I joke with Nisha because I have my like nerdy EduClimber moments, but I'll let one of them talk about how it's helped them.
This is entertaining, by the way, and hearing you talk as well. Let's go. Yeah.
So it's
I'm so engaged.
There's hazing going on. I feel it. So EduClimber has been transformative in the way that our teachers and our system as a whole have been able to engage in data. We've had spreadsheets for a number of years, and the color coding is something that we have created, but sometimes there are glitches within the system, right? So we've had teachers who've gone on to add their data to a spreadsheet and completely deleted everybody else's data. Like situations like that have happened in the past. So those little kind of pieces are a thing of the past. What EduClimber allows us to do in that real time is to look at a student. So say if we're looking at a 5th grade student, we can see the entire spectrum of their data in all areas all at once. And that helps to inform us about what we have in place for that child, what we need to put in place for that child, and then what we need to communicate as we are having those meetings of transition towards Y-Down. And it's such a way that when we're adding tags, those tags are meaningful across our district, so that we're able to talk and have those comparable conversations that I feel like in the past we would come together and say, oh, what are you doing how does that look? How does that work? We spent so much time catching up on those aspects that we wasted and missed out on those opportunities to capitalize moving forward. So again, it's that systemic view of how we respond to our students it's made us so much better as educators.
Awesome, thank you, I appreciate it. Let someone else talk.
So I'll get with just one more real quick thing, Jason, sorry. No, I think the other thing that is going to be more helpful with it would also be a longitudinal approach. Because one of the things that happens as students move from grade level to grade level is at times we have to, you can get the data, but having it all in one place, so when you go to one kid, you just pull up the kid and you can see all of that. When that kid goes from 4th to 5th grade, that's going to be helpful from 3rd to 4th grade, and you can see some of that is also a helpful approach to being able to see it longitudinally. Because I think as important as some of this is, and I would use the science data that you mentioned, I think we also have to think it's 1 year. So like when you mentioned growth from science, you're talking about literally that's 1 year's 5th grade versus the next year's 5th grade. So it's hard to say, is it this? Because is it some changes in the curriculum that benefited that next group of students that the first group of students didn't have? Because it's literally one grade level of kids who took the test 2 years in a row. So is it enough data to really say it was this or whether it was that, or do we need a couple more years? Is still something I think we have to consider also, just so we can keep tracking some of these things as they're going. So we want to celebrate those things and hopefully hold on to it, but also seeing that longitudinal approach through some of this will be beneficial, especially when we talk about going back to the quote that, like I said, was Melina, where it's that plan for each individual student. So when we talk about I can tell you about the kids more than I can tell you what 398 means on this. I can tell you if you show me who that kid is, I can tell you about that kid.
So equitability, it also helps with equitability, right? So being able to.
Mm-hmm. Well, even just like I was thinking, if you could see when Melina had in the top secret mode, you can see the faces, right? So you can just, there's going to be things that you're going to be able to recognize just by looking at it.
That's cool.
And just also on that side, like what we were talking about, like those bridges of those success plans. And I think these are things that as a board, you guys have asked us for a couple of years. Like it shouldn't be starting new when they come to 6th grade. Like we should know what specific skills they have, how we bridge that in 6th grade, and then how that goes on to Dan. Like that's exactly what we talked about today. Like who is 8th graders that he needs to have an eye out that may need an intervention into reading. We're a small enough district, it should be very continuous. And so
and that way we're not reinventing the wheel every year
exactly
also. So we know what's been tried, we know it's been successful, and so that we can hopefully continue with that success.
And we're talking a lot about academics, but it also holds place for socio-emotional. So like what socio-emotional support was in the elementary schools that we should just pick up and grow with versus like learning this kid new each time they come. So it's going to be great.
Gotcha. Well, thank you all. I appreciate you all answering the question. And congratulations and good job. So.
Okay, I'll go. Thank you for all that. And I guess while we're on the EduClimber talk, I feel like anytime we're showing EduClimber, we all get so excited about it. Because I really think, like, in my years on the board, our investment of money and your time to learn EduClimber is one of, like, the best investments we've made to make a real difference in each of our students, truly. Because everything you all just shared, that you can learn so quickly about how to intervene with our students is so important, and will help all of them. Most importantly, more, as you said, more quickly. Like it's just in real time to know how fast and where you need to intervene. So I love that we're doing the EduClimber. I think it's great. I wanted to thank you, Melina, for explaining like the Missouri growth model and those anomalies, because it did help put in perspective some of those like red numbers or below average scores. So now that we understand that, I think that helps a lot too. Do our students receiving special services take the same assessments?
So the majority of our students take the same assessment. There's a small population of students who are identified to take an alternative assessment, but it's a very small percentage of our students, so the majority of them take the same assessment.
Okay, because like that struck me as a question, because that is one of the student groups that, not in what you showed us here, but in the bigger report, had a very low percentage of them meeting the benchmark for like the FAST for the reading.
Right.
And I was just wondering, but are they even assessed the same way? I guess, even in a big picture in this, are they
right,
assessed?
and with our local assessments, we have more control over what that looks like, and we've put some things in place. So Robin's office and my office have been partnering with Special School District to put some things in place to have some really deliberate structures to be able to make decisions about what assessments students take, to better reflect their ability or their growth over time. And so we're putting more specific structures in place for that. But we don't have as much control over the state assessments as we do over our local pieces.
Right, okay. I was just wondering, like, when I see those low numbers of that student group, is it really accurate, or is it a large enough number of them or not? And is it even a fair assessment, an equitable assessment for some of them to be taking? And then I'd honestly say, like, all of your examples answered a lot of my questions, because a lot of my questions were like, how do you handle this in the classroom? So thank you for all of that. Let me see. I think the only other thing, I was just so impressed too with those like APR reports, and we scored 100% in like all of the areas of continuous improvement, and a lot of those areas of performance, which I think is great. I loved what Dr. Martin said about we have a responsibility to grow all students. So I think that's a perfect example. If we see these like above average and 100% ratings and scores, to remember, like, of course we need to pay attention to the red numbers and those student groups and the individual students that need help, but that we can't get complacent, like in the high schools, the high scores, the high ratings, and the above average scores too, that we, need to be growing all that. I loved what you said. That was great. Anyway, thank you for that, and thank you for all of your examples, because it helps really make those concrete, real examples take an abstract concept and thought and these numbers and makes them, personalized. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'll just go. I'll jump in. So the first is just a clarifying question. The numbers that we see up there, are those derived from which assessment?
It's the grade level assessment. So the state grade level assessment, grades 3 through 8, and the end of course exams at the high school in the 4 content areas. So at 3 through 8, it's math and ELA every year, science 5th grade and 8th grade. And then at the high school, it's Algebra 1, English 2, Biology, and Government.
So I guess, so it's a combination of a standardized test and then our local.
So these are just state numbers. It's not the local assessments at all. So like in the report, we gave you the stuff related. So the local assessments like NWA and FAST, we gave you in the report. Because of the change from MSIP 5 to MSIP 6, I decided to amplify just the state stuff in our presentation tonight.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's great. I always worry that just with respect to the standardized testing, that we're not letting just the one standardized test define a child, and making sure that within EduClimber that we are also looking at, in addition to the standardized test, growth that kids might be making. Like sometimes for a child, like the magic might happen in the elective classes or in athletics, or are any of those factored into EduClimber, or?
So right now what's factored in there is anything that's on the assessment matrix, grades. So you can start, so you see a little bit of that elective piece reflected within grades, so you can pull grades from there, attendance. And then some of the ways that we have made decisions in tagging students. So like at the high school, we've had some conversation about tagging students by athletics in order for like coaches to be able to look and think through that, and for teachers to be able to look at that as like a more 360 view of a child. So like they're more than just a test score or something like that, but being able to sort of triangulate some of those data. I agree with you. None of us is ever going to make a decision that's based on one test score. Oftentimes when we're starting to have these conversations where we're putting like a reading success plan in place or something like that, that's based on multiple data points.
So what about just the kids, a student's grades that they receive on their report card? How is that factored in too?
So that can be, so if I extended this spreadsheet out, you can extend it out to include all of their grades and all of their courses, which also allows teachers to be able to look at, like, one of the things that we've been trying to do at the high school, but we keep getting snowed out on professional development days, is to work with the teachers to be able to, like, as I inherit a new group of students at the semester, I want to look at, like, how have they historically done in English class, and what does that tell me about this student? And then how can I triangulate that with some other assessment data or some other information? Arguably, this system is limited in the sense that it's not going to give you a complete picture of the student because it's intended to be a data warehouse. So it's intended to house that type of information. We've been working with Panorama to figure out how to be able to have that be a component of this also, because that piece ties into what Jamie was talking about like the social emotional side of pieces and being able to have that as a part of the conversation. So while it's not in the system now, when the teams are having those conversations, they're able to talk about the students from, like, those pieces also.
I will add to that, like, one of the things that Melina's having us help to do in working with the ICs is actually, like, in the care team process, like, having the same language all the way through. And EduClimber does have a form that you can complete, the form about strengths and weaknesses and parent concerns and all of those things. So it's, like, housed in the same spot. So if they have these meetings in 4th and 5th grade, when they come to 6th grade and we're starting to see some struggles, we can pull it up and we can see what you're talking about, sort of like the whole child. Like, what did their 5th grade teachers, like, the qualitative data around what they said about them, what are their parents saying, you know, things that we know about them that a lot of times really isn't discussed unless you're in an IEP or 504 meeting. It's a more comprehensive view that we can allow for all the kids to have some of these pieces.
When we developed that form, we paralleled a lot of it off of IEP type forms, and the fact that the first thing on the form is, like, what are the strengths of this child? So to start from a strengths-based conversation, of, like, there are places that we can celebrate with every child. Let's start there before we start to talk about the other pieces. So we had control over the development of that form.
Yeah, I think that's great. I assume there's times when there's just a complete disconnect between, like, the child's grades and their standardized test scores. And then that would allow you to, you know, whether or not, you know, let's say that they perform really high on the standardized test, but their grades aren't so, you know, they're making D's and F's, and you can make appropriate interventions.
Well, and I mean, to kind of tie with that, maybe it's, and sometimes it's grades and it might be there, but other times it may be like we try to have frequent conversations about what does it mean to be successful.
Right.
So when you're asking what does it mean for this student, it may be, you may have a student who performs very well on all these assessments, they're performing advanced, but they were having a lot of anxiety, or they're having a lot of mental health issues, or they're having a hard time working with others. Is that student successful, more or less successful than another student who may be in a reading intervention, performing at a basic level, but growing, but is the kid that everybody wants to work with, feels very positive, feels a lot of strengths? Which one of those students is successful? The truth is they both are in some ways, and they both aren't in some ways. So how do we make sure that we're framing that conversation around the kid? And I think also we've tried to incorporate as much as we can with our PLCs is have our counselor join in those PLC conversations at times to talk about that whole child approach. So at times it's been every few weeks, like we would try to do about once a month, where he would join each of the PLCs, and then we would talk about the child from that more whole child perspective. Because, like, I would say the same thing. These are data points. That's what actually I kind of said that with Jason, which is if you tell me who the kid is, I can tell you about the kid more than what that number means. And so what are we looking at for the kid, and can we talk about that child?
EduClimber, is it algorithmic in any way? Like, I know it's as good as the data you put in there now, but could it be algorithmic where it starts to capture some characteristics about these kids? Because I'm thinking about kids in the middle, right? Kids in the middle are the ones that who might need other programming and things that to help keep them interlocked into to education. So Is it algorithmic? Could it be algorithmic? Could you make it algorithmic? Could it capture
So
characteristics like that?
it will do whatever we force it to do,
Right.
if that makes sense. So like when I talked about the threshold piece of us being able to capture, so like this is a good example of a threshold of kids in the middle. So when we think about the students that we're going to intervene with, we're talking about below the 30th percentile. The next tier of students, the 31st to the 49th percentile, 50th percentile is considered on grade level. So that next tier that's like close to them, let's capture those students. Let's talk about those students. Is there anything that we need to be thinking through with these students? And so looking at those individuals. So it's looking at 68 students is different than looking at 650 students, right? And I mean, this is only, this is for all 3 grade levels. So 68 students allows us to have conversation. 650, that's a harder conversation to have. We don't have time to have like that. Like we can't sit down and talk about 650 students in a meeting. Right. But if you break this up by grade level, you're looking at 19 students in 6th grade, 29 in 7th, and 20 in 8th. Those teams can have those conversations to say, like, what can we be doing to support these students? Because they may just need a little bit of a bump. For them to be in a much more secure space with their work. So algorithmic, I don't know that I know what that means, but I will say that like I can force the system to do whatever I want the system to do.
So you are the algorithm.
All right.
Right.
I am the algorithm.
Right. So the matrix here. So I just wanted to make sure. I just wanted to know that because I wanted to be clear. And it's a lot of talk about when I'm hitting these doors. By the way, when we hit these doors, we get a lot of conversation about kids in the middle.
Yeah.
And it just seems like this is a great tool, being able to narrow it down to a smaller subset of students, and being able to hone in on them and then help them out in whatever areas might get them to that level, to that next level of engagement. So.
Right. I think the other thing that's powerful with this tool is the efficiency piece. So Dan's team invited me to one of their grade level meetings to just experience their grade level meeting and like how they go about talking about students and how they go about identifying the students that they're going to talk about and everything. There's a lot of human capital going into developing spreadsheets, to pulling data from different pieces and everything. So I came back from that meeting, developed a threshold for them that was a weighted threshold that identified the same students that they had spent a long time doing. Now the system is doing it automatically for them. So now the person is coming in and now the system's also pushing an email to that person once a week to say, here are the students that now we need to talk about in this meeting. You can then assign a meeting in the system. All the kids are then there. I now invite you to my meeting. You already know coming into the meeting who we're talking about, and all of their data and information is there. So we're not spending the time. So it's like we can spend the time to do the work as opposed to spending the time figuring out who we're going to talk about. Now we've made the system do that for us, and so now we're putting the energy, because our time is really precious. They only have planning periods for this amount of time.
Right.
And so now we can spend that time really focused on what needs to happen for this individual student versus, who are we talking about?
Gotcha.
Okay, great. So I'll stay on EduClimber just for a little bit. So I'm still a little confused only by virtue of, it sounds like we're using parts of EduClimber, but then I also heard that there's a big lift to get people into the system. So, and then I also heard, that we're at Y-Down, we're using a massive spreadsheet, right, to identify spotlight students. So I know we're in the first or second maybe year of EduClimber, first year.
Yeah.
And so my impression was it was kind of more of a beta system that we're trying out and that you're piloting in a few different areas, but we're still using these massive spreadsheets and everything else.
So for the most part, we've moved away from the massive spreadsheets at this point because, so what has to happen with EduClimber is my team has to enter all the data into the system.
Okay,
And
so
then,
your team controls the data lake.
yes.
Okay, then my next question is that data lake, how asymmetrical is the information between students? For example, I'm in 10th grade, for example, and Jason's in kindergarten. Well, EduClimber is going to be great for Jason in kindergarten with the data that's getting entered this year.
but I've been in the district for 9 years already. Are you entering my last 9 years of data?
No, we're
Or are
entering
we
your last
starting-
3 years of data.
Okay.
So we started from, so the decision that we made was the most pertinent data for us that usually informs our practice is three years of data.
Okay.
So at this point, my team has completed entering everything from the assessment matrix for the past 3 years.
For every student
For
in the
every
district.
student in the district.
Okay, that's great. And then what's the cost of this system? I am the treasurer, so it would be, remiss of me not to ask that. And what's the ongoing cost of maintaining the system? I mean, it sounds like it's a great tool. It sounds like we're getting use out of this tool. It sounds like we're saving teachers and administrators on planning time, but
The cost, the initial cost of it, I don't want to quote a number because I'm actually not totally sure, but what I will say is that it did not cost any more than the system that we were using previously that was not actually working for us because we were creating spreadsheets and everything like that. So the old system that we used that I've probably talked about before called SchoolNet was an add-on to PowerSchool, and there were probably only about 3 of us who were using the system. And so I replaced that cost with EduClimber.
Okay.
So it's like, I'm pretty sure it's a net increase of 0.
Okay. John, you and I maybe can connect after and figure out I'm just curious as to, are we talking hundreds of thousands of dollars? Are we talking
No.
$100,000 for the licensing? What are we?
I want to say 20.
Okay.
I was going to say 20. John says 18.
Oh, excellent. That's money well spent. then.
So it
Good.
keeps going down.
Okay.
Can I respond to one other thing that you said about
Yeah.
the lift? So when I was saying that, what I was saying was what we learned with the rollout of SchoolNet. So I also rolled out SchoolNet when I first came into this role, and I didn't roll it out well. And so that, as a consequence of that, only 3 of us really knew how to use it. So what I learned from that then was in moving to a different data warehousing system, what's the onboarding process for this? So what we spent was last year in the spring semester, this team and a little bit of an extension of this team got trained by the company,
And
which
you became
was
super users.
Which not really. It was as good as it could have been with that kind of training. So then what we have done as a consequence of that is that our team has committed to within our monthly meetings that we have EduClimber training sessions from me. Where we use our most practical information. So it's like, here's what I want to do at Wydown. Okay, here's what we have done. Now let me show everyone else in the district how you can now use the system to be able to do that. So once this team is really good at that, then we feel like we can roll it to the teachers. So the teachers see things, they're just not accessing it in the same way that we are. So they're not using the system to create the spreadsheet. We're creating the spreadsheet in the system for them right now. The goal is that they will be able to do it themselves.
Okay, and that'll be
next
part
year.
of professional development that
Yes.
you have planned over
Yes.
the summer or over the course of the year?
It'll be
depending on how you
through
roll
next
it out?
year's PD plan, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, and then actually, since I've been on the board, we've gone from MSIP 5 and we're now in MSIP 6, and I'm sure before I'm gone, there'll be MSIP 7.
Yep.
And my struggle with, and I thank you, by the way, every year for faithfully reporting these numbers, even though the goalposts always seem to shift on us. The most, I think, meaningful part of the discussion that I always get is when you guys talk about how you implement it practically within the schools. And then because the goalposts always shift, I think, as a board or personally as an individual board member, and I know as a board collectively, since we've, as this board, worked together for so long, we're always interested to see how we compare against other schools that we're often compared to. So I went and did a search of how Captain is compared to Ladue, Kirkwood, Parkway, and Rockwood. And I would say, congratulations, we are ranked the first of those school districts with the exception of social studies. And now I know why, because there were only 15 students in the high school that took that end of course exam.
That one was 56.
So, or 56.
Yeah.
So we're third there. So I thought that was a positive indicator just in terms of how we assess our school district in comparison to our peer school districts. Then the other thing that I did is I looked between the elementary schools within the same MSIP plan. And Melena, you said that a 5-point plus or minus difference, at least to you, is statistically significant. Well, there exists a pretty big gap within our elementary schools. So there's a 28-point gap between one elementary school and the other elementary, the highest and lowest elementary schools in science. There's a 10-point gap in math and English language arts. So how are you guys then assessing what's working well in, for example, Captain and Merrimack for ELA, but not as well at Glen Ridge or in some of the other areas? Like, are you guys looking across to see what's really being done well in one elementary school, and we could maybe benefit from some of that? I know you talked about, Jen, using human resources so that you've got the best positioned teacher to help the students really benefit from her or his experience to get them up to whatever tiered intervention that they're in. Are we going to try to do that across elementary schools so that we have more consistency in the levels of reporting amongst the elementary schools? Or why is there such a big difference if 5 points is the statistical difference?
So one way that, as you're talking, something that kind of comes to mind is the fact that just like we provided dedicated time for our science specialists to have a PLC, the elementary principals have developed their own PLC. So we believe in this practice. We want our teachers to do it, and we're also engaging in that same practice so that we can continue to share our best practices and what's happening in our schools. Even just the beginning of this school year, as we were onboarding new curriculum in the area of mathematics, we got together on our own. We visited each other's schools. We went into classrooms. We saw how it was being implemented. We had conversation about the ways in which we were supporting teachers to try to build better alignment. And then we also do that as principal colleagues from all of the schools. So all 6 schools, we come together, we visit each other's schools through our principal instructional talk-throughs. So I think part of that process that we've tried to assure for consistency and continuity in our grade levels, we as leaders recognize that we need to model that process and have begun doing that. I think the other thing that's really going to help us with that as we move forward is looking how we can use EduClimber in a way to help guide those conversations, because historically our practice has been, I see and monitor Captain data, and I can learn about practices and see practices, but we have not, we don't want to be, or we don't want to foster a culture of competition between the schools. That's very unhealthy. But when we share our practices in a way that we can learn from one another, that only enhances our experience. And so I look forward to, as we mentioned, we haven't been using at least as a principal, I have not been using EduClimber yet for even a full year. So I think there's a lot of room to grow in that retrospect. But I'm really supportive and proud of the collaboration that we've developed as elementary principals and the way that we're working together. In my 10 years here, I can say I've never collaborated with my colleagues in this district as much as we do now, and we really have a nice synergy building. So I think those things will give us some pathways to start engaging in some more conversations in that area. But I also wanted to say too, we have different cultures to our communities, right? We're talking about different kids, and the success that I see for one year might be different next year, because we are looking at students that matriculate through a system. And ultimately, what I think all 3 of us are very committed to is the amount of growth each cohort is progressing with. And I think as Melena and I have had some conversations about how we look at growth. The way that they're asking us to look at growth, at least from an elementary lens, has never been the perception or the way that I've ever looked at growth before. I want to see, did this child as a 3rd grader grow as a child in 4th grade? And in 4th grade, did they grow from 5th grade? Instead of comparing one group of kids in 3rd grade to a different group of kids in 3rd grade. Does that make sense? So I am excited about the individual growth targets. I think that's a nice move, but it will require us to look at data from a different perspective. Instead of kind of a percent of students who have grown, we're going to have to look at that slightly differently. So I think as the state changes and we change along with some of those expectations, these conversations are going to organically happen. Did you want to add anything, Patrick?
The only other thing I would add is that I think the other benefit we have here when we talk about human resource, honestly, is when you talk about all three elementaries, it's hard for me to say what's going on in Captain or what's going on in Glenridge because, I mean, other than some of these visits and our conversations, I'm not there on a day-to-day basis. Just like it's hard for me if I wouldn't go to my third grade and ask them, what is our fifth grade doing? You know, I know those things. The people on the building levels, they support those things. We do benefit from having the support of, I mean, Melena knows every teacher. I have no doubt that she knows every teacher in the district, and she can talk to you about them and knows what's going on. So we do we work closely with our central office here, which I think that is, in my experience in education, is different here than it has been other places. There we see our central administrators in our buildings all the time. And that is different because they know those systems and they help guide some of that work for us as a district. So when you talk about 3 elementary schools, you're really talking about more than half the district. You know, so that's where that district level perspective also helps guide some of that work, and then we help follow their vision. So that's that CSIP. That's those plans that we then look to implement and follow as well. And so, like what Jen said, I would hesitate to go into why is this versus the schools versus the other schools, and just look at how do we then take collective responsibility for we're all working within the same district, and how do we help support whatever if Glenridge has a different group, or one year it might be Merrimack, and so how do we kind of look through that if we have a cohort that's experiencing a challenge. I've talked to Tarita at Glenridge about having a fourth section because we may have a big groups, and how do we build some of these when you've got 4 versus 3 in the system, and having some of those discussions that she may be experiencing that I haven't, and how do we continue to kind of work with each other to grow and make sure but I do think that support from the central office is something that it helps us kind of as we look to go and overcome some of those challenges.
Yeah, and I think that's all great. I think my overall, though, question still is, if 5 points is statistically significant by our own measure, the wondering is there's a much bigger gap than that between those elementary schools, and all of those elementary school students eventually come together in the middle school into Jamie's school. And then what you would like to see is that everybody's getting the same quality collectively of education, regardless of which elementary school you go to, so that the kind of width of students that you're receiving looks like this instead of like this, where one elementary school has a lot of kids in a particular subject that's on this side of the spectrum, and another elementary school is coming into the middle school with students that are further along. And so I don't know if that's statistically, it's your number, it's 5 is what you said.
Right, I want to be careful about the statistically significant.
Yeah.
It's just my number.
Right.
That I start to have conversation with.
Right, and you're looking at other data besides just this one test, but I think that, within our district, it is normal, as it is within other districts, for people to compare elementary schools to each other. And to the extent that we can ensure that there is what sounds like we have a desire to share best practices and make sure all of our students are receiving, the same type or similar types of experiences in all 3 schools with respect to learning, that is actually the case, because otherwise we already have it just based on, as you said, the culture of the schools. Right. People choose to move into a particular ward based on what they perceive as the quote unquote, not my words, but other people's best elementary school. And you don't want reflection of scores like this to either solidify an opinion or change an opinion. I think we want the perception in the community and within the elementary schools to be Wydown is just as good as, Captain is just as good as Glenridge, is just as good as Merrimack, right? So that's the reason that I asked the question that way. And then my last question is actually from.
Yeah, because it kind of seems like you said that they're comparing a different third grade group to a different third grade group, right? Isn't that what you said, for example?
Right. So if you were to look at the things that are in the appendix where it says third grade, and you look at 2022 for third grade and 2023 for third grade, those are 2 different groups of students. In order to see growth you would have to look at it from the 3rd grade in 2022 to the 4th grade in 2023. So that's part of the reason why when I report stuff, I lift it up to report it by a whole school versus
And I'm looking at the
by
whole
that.
school scores. I'm not
Right.
looking at the growth scores. That's
Right.
what I'm referring to. So
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
I'm not looking. I agree with you. The growth thing is wonky.
Right.
I'm looking at the absolute whole school scores. So that's
Mm-hmm.
that's the only wondering that I'll leave with you guys
Yep.
to come back with.
Yep.
My last question actually is for you, Mohini. So you've taken end of course exams. Your peers have taken end of course exams. We have a policy kind of within our high school now, and maybe even within the middle school, that sometimes your first test isn't your last test. How do students in the high school go into these exams? Do they make an effort? Do they take them seriously? There's just been a change in perception, I think, amongst high school students in particular. I'll just talk about what I see within my own household about which exams are important, which exams you try on, which exams you don't try on based on whether or not they quote unquote count. So, you've taken these exams. How do people take them seriously? I mean, our scores reflect, like I said, we're doing better than the other schools, but how do students go into these exams?
Well, like last year we took the English exam, I think, and it was sort of like 2 different kinds of students, right? You had to sit in class and you couldn't really go on your computer or your phone if you didn't have time to. So a lot of people decided, oh, if they set a time, might as well do it. That was sort of like the first thing. So people who like genuinely put in effort. But then I do agree that there's definitely a good chunk of students who like clicked through the whole thing and probably didn't do much. Because if it doesn't really have any impact in the grade in the way, sophomore or junior doesn't really see it as worth their time to really invest and work on that. And sometimes even the teacher will say, like they're not going to really look at the end of course exam, like when it comes to evaluating the student itself. And so if it's like not even going to matter within the class, it seems like that's, just like the general opinion about these state exams.
Yeah, so I think, Dan, that's probably something for us just to be aware of, and for you and the teachers at the high school to be aware of. I don't know how we change that.
I would say that's
mindset,
not a new mindset. I having been the testing coordinator in the district for I started out in my first role 23 years ago as that, and we had the same issues 23 years ago where if it didn't factor into their grade, they didn't care.
Yeah.
I'm like, and so like, and then. And now they know that the students know they have to take it in order to meet the graduation requirements, but the scores, for an individual doesn't really matter to them. So we work with teachers to try to emphasize the importance of it actually in showing growth. But I recognize that, but it's an ongoing issue, but certainly not a new one.
Yeah, and then maybe perhaps it's a universal truth because like I said, it doesn't seem to affect how we're baselined against our competing school districts. That's it. Thank you guys for the very informative report.
I'll try to keep it short. I'll actually be the exact opposite of the other Jason. I'll start with EduClimber and I'll come back to some of the opportunity gap stuff. But on EduClimber, going back to part of what Kim was talking about on the implementation of it district-wide, it seems like this is, and I'm just as excited about it as everyone else, so don't get me wrong. Enterprise software implementations are horrible, right? And I guess, is there a plan yet to implement this? We have a documented plan to implement across the district?
I have a documented plan in my office.
Okay.
and it's got so we're sort of in phase 1 right now of the plan of making sure, because the other piece is when I was saying, when Kim was asking the question, the things that I learned from the old system, one of the things was I was the point of truth. So then I was responsible for training all 500 teachers within the district. It wasn't going to happen, right?
Right.
So now it's I need to have a team that you use the term super user. I need a team of super users who can help me to implement that piece. And the other piece that I think is really important that we've learned is we have to have it be meaningful to the groups that we're presenting it to. So what we've been snowed out twice at the high school with, we were really deliberate about having that conversation with Dan and his team about like, what's the data piece that we can show to teachers that makes them feel like this is an important tool for me that's going to help move my work forward. The high school is probably the hardest of all the schools in order to implement because there's the least amount of data in the system for the high school because we test students less frequently on the localized things on the assessment matrix. We test students the most frequently at the elementary. Sure. So that's all part of my plan.
Have you considered an external implementation partner?
Meaning from the company?
Yeah, or some sort of a third-party consulting firm.
So I would ask, like, if you look at the faces of this group, the training we got from the company was not helpful to us.
From EduClimber or from, okay.
From EduClimber. So
Yeah.
what has been more helpful has been me partnering with people from other districts who have the system, me coming in and working with this group, because then it's the same thing. I can make the data pertinent to them. EduClimber's presenting stuff to us. Like at one point they were talking to us about stuff. We didn't even have data in the system and they were talking to us about it. And we're like, well, we don't know what we're doing because we don't have data in the system.
Yeah. Well, just for what it's worth, in terms of board investments in our budget for next year, if there's a quality third-party implementation partner who knows how to do enterprise software implementations in K through 12 systems, I'd certainly be open to, voting to fund that. Yeah. So I just, wanted to make that point. Thank you for listening. Sure. Going back to just really quickly on some of the test score stuff, and I share the same excitement that other people have shared, particularly around the student group population and the advancements we made there. So congratulations on that. Sort of a slightly different take on what Jason asked earlier is, and somewhat along the lines of what I just asked, is there something that we could be doubling down on through investment as a board to support this continued work and this continued success?
Human resources. I mean, honestly, I guess you heard the elementary school teachers talk about it, and I'm just putting my plug out there. Nisha's smiling at me, so. But I know everybody needs to be fiscally responsible. But there are some things that would really help in terms of human resources in regards to, and that's where hiring great quality teachers, maintaining great quality teachers. Sure. I mean, I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but that's the one that popped in my head.
Yeah.
I think what popped in my head is, when we think about the whole child, oftentimes as my colleagues and I come together for our principal meetings, we're still talking about our social emotional needs in the district and really thinking about what our students need. So while a lot of times this particular report reflects a lot of our academic progress, I think continuing to be innovative in the ways in which we are funding and supporting social emotional growth in our district is going to be a priority for each school here.
Cool. I just want to say ditto. I honestly, I think that's exactly. I think when we talk, and if you talk to teachers, the mental health is something that you may not. I think it's probably a lagging indicator.
Sure.
That at some point in time, if we don't take care of that, you're going to see it show up on here. But it's one of those things that if you talk to, that's probably not just us in this district, other places, but it is.
Yeah.
It's where most of our energy goes.
Yeah, sure. One more question, and then I'll end with the comment. So exactly symmetrical to Jason, I guess. But
nice.
Yeah. That's why I said it. I thought it was nice. Yeah. Is the APR results the right way to think about how we're doing in closing the opportunity gap, right? We do a bunch of assessments. We pick some this is the thing I ask about the most if there's one topic, right, in a meeting. And I'm like a measures guy, right? So how do I think about what's the right way to look at this in terms of how we're doing there?
The reason why I would say no, so what I would say is it's a data point in that conversation. It's not the data point in that conversation because it's based on one test, one day for each child.
Sure.
It changes every 2 years.
That's sort of why I ask it, right? Like, you know,
So,
the answer shouldn't.
so I think the pieces that we've been talking about knowing our students well, being able to respond to their individual needs, thinking about goal 2 of our strategic plan that focuses really, like we call it empowered learning, but when you look at the definition of it, it's around personalized and individualized instruction. The pieces that the principals have talked about tonight, I think what Patrick talked about with the reading success plans is a really good example of us looking at that individual child and saying, what's the thing that's going to move that individual child forward? And what's going to move little Jen forward is not going to be the same thing that's going to move little Melina forward. And that we're doing a much better job of identifying that, as opposed to what I think was a little more like sort of like global, like we'll do this. Or we'll change our math resource or something like that. Like obviously we're still going to change those resources, but now we're having much more deliberate conversation in teams about those individual students, and that's what I feel like is going to be the power to help with that.
Yeah. Okay. Not for tonight, but at some point, at least I could use some education on like, hey, these are like the 5 things we sort of look at, you know, or whatever it is. So again, not for tonight, you know, maybe something for next year even, but you know, that's something that I would appreciate. The last thing I'll say is, Jason asked a question that was basically like, how'd you do it, right? And Dr. Martin, you start with your question, your answer, and everyone jumped in, and what occurred to me is really what you guys are describing. You're sort of too humble to say it, is culture and leadership, right? And we all know the importance of school leadership. We all read articles about how it's hard to find great leaders, and the thing I'm walking away from is that we have a great team of school leaders and district leaders, and so kudos to you guys, so thanks for that.
Yeah, good job. So what would be the 5? I'm just joking. I was just joking. Go ahead.
My question was sort of about in the high school, when is tier 2 intervention deemed necessary?
That would be when a student was not performing or was not getting it in the classroom, and so then the teacher was doing either some small group instruction, either in a pull-out form or even within the classroom, actually working with a group of students while other students did other work.
It's also like the implementation of Greyhound time, like the thinking of Greyhound time was really around that thinking of like, how do we provide additional support where needed, or like additional touches with a teacher where you may need to touch base with that teacher in order to do that.
And then we also have some co-taught models that we do too, where we use 2 teachers within the same classroom.
Okay, cool. That was
That's excellent.
Any other questions?
Are we a little bit, but no more?
I have 5 more questions. No, I'm joking. Just so back to what Jason said though, what would be your ideal situation, your ideal training scenario? Like if you can come up with one and get this stuff implemented, and you all to be as efficient as possibly can, efficacious, like what would be the ideal process?
For me, and I'm only speaking from my perspective, to really rely on somebody within my building that knows the system and knows the system well. I already know who that is in my building. It's my instructional coordinator. And she has been working with our other building leadership team members to start kind of already expanding that responsibility. So our literacy coach, our reading specialist, our math specialist, they are like, this is already probably maybe a little bit further down the road of implementation than even that plan originally laid out. And so really dedicating time and effort and energy to somebody within the building who can be that point person, who can respond to questions, is very knowledgeable about it, has access to Melina when we need to develop something different. And that is really truly becoming a very effective practice. So continuing to provide some of the ongoing training and empowering the instructional coordinators, or maybe it's an assistant principal or another administrator who can kind of have this as part of their job detail and responsibilities. At the elementary level, I think it makes the most sense to be the instructional coordinators because they are building test assessment coordinators as well. And they're often very integral in the PLC process. And when we have student study teams or they're monitoring student intervention, they also have a hand in IEPs and 504s. So I think continuing to give that training to kind of that train the trainer approach will be very powerful. And like I said, we've already seen it starting to kind of move past what our current expectations were as far as usage at the elementary level.
You all feel the same way, I guess?
I mean, I would say, oh, sorry, but I would say similar. I think we also, one of the things I know we've kind of worked on recently is that culture of coaching. And so we do have coaches, that's that human resources that we also have there. So it starts, like I would say, instructional coordinator as well for us. And, you know, I just have the benefit, our instructional coordinator had used the same system prior to us having it. So when I have these questions, I go to her because she has a different level of knowledge than even because she's used it previously. And so I think there's that. And then even then being able to focus with our literacy specialist on what might you be able to do in the area of literacy with this? What might this look like for math with our math specialist? And as they're having those conversations, the better they are with when they go in and work with the PLC, they're going to be able to bring it right back into the PLCs and give it back to the teachers. So I think utilizing some of those structures that we already have in place around with that culture of coaching, I think is going to be beneficial.
I was just going to say, I think the way that Melina has rolled it out has been really smart in that, like, keeping the people who control the data lake very small, because if we really want to use this K-12, then the tags and the ways that kids are pulled up or the specific interventions that are going in have to be the right verbiage and usage so that, like, you can use it over years. So, like, allowing all the teachers to go in and do all this right now is not going to be the most effective. So, like, allowing it in phases of what they need to see and what they need to know. So, like, she's already worked with my counseling team about how to do the what the counseling team may need. You know, teachers are at a different level. So I think all of that is really supportive. I also think that, like, once we get going with it, like partnering with other schools, like I know Kirkwood uses it. So recently I was meeting with the Kirkwood team looking at math and how they're using it is also would be helpful. So I think all of these rollouts, but I absolutely do believe, like, keeping it tight in the beginning, coordinating, making sure we're coordinated, and then going for that. And that's exactly what Melina's done. I think it's been the right rollout compared to where we were before.
And not to just be redundant, but I would agree 100% that I think Melina's been very thoughtful about working with the administrative teams, then working with the probably like our grade level teams and learning center folks who are going to be the super users or the heaviest users, and then basically working down from there. And actually, I know we've been snowed out twice, so as long as it doesn't snow in late April, we'll be all right. Actually, so Melina's coming to work with our full faculty actually then, but no, I appreciate that. And then the idea of having easy access to a building-based super user, if you will, because I know right now Melina's close enough that I still bother her that I say, you know, okay, this is what I'm trying, this is the data I'm trying to pull, how do I get there? And then she's always been very responsive, but having someone locally based that was that skilled would be huge.
I would say also that our new director of professional learning and assessment is also a user already in her current district, and so that increases my team and our capacity to be able to extend our reach also. So her usage has been more than mine, and so I think that also helps us as we're moving forward.
Thank you all. I appreciate that very much.
And while they're sitting here, I don't have a question. No worries, no worries. I just want to take this opportunity because they're sitting here in front of this board that these individuals in front of you have put a lot of work to move our kids and getting to know them. Our biggest goal was get to know the kids by name and their needs and move the needle. That's the charge. And they have been amazing at it. And yes, we have a long way to go still, but I just want to tell you guys publicly in front of the board how much I appreciate your commitment and passion and, you know, appreciation for even when we push a little more, then, you know, you're willing to take it, and we are a fun team. They always tease they always tease.
Well, we're all about fun.
When we have our meetings, they always say, Nisha, this is a fun meeting, so I just want to appreciate, see all the time, right? But I do want to thank you for all the hard work and commitment behind this, because it's making a difference on our kids. So, thank you.
Thank you all.
You all having fun. It might be. I love it.
I don't think you would. They were being fun. I wish.
Can we take a 5-minute break?
Yes.
Okay.
Luke? Are we on? We're good. Oh. Oh.
Yeah, we're on.
Okay. Good evening again.
Good evening. Welcome back.
Tonight we're going to start with the next several meetings. We'll be talking about the content areas that have finished they're in the spring of their second year of their self-study. So with me is Jason Thompson, the coordinator for counseling, and I just want to publicly thank you for the work and the leadership that you've done with the team and your curriculum committee to prepare the report. Because this is the first group coming through, I just wanted to provide some context for everyone as we move through the next several meetings. And specifically about counseling, because they're a little bit different than our traditional content areas. And so what we will be focusing on within these meetings is the work that the team has done through a 2-year self-study process of identifying long-range goals and the financials that are attached to those goals. So at the next meeting, you will take a vote to approve their long-range goals. Why counseling is different is because counseling is both a curriculum and a program. And so what I want to make sure that we highlight with this is that tonight our focus is going to be around curriculum. And it's not going to be around the programming components of counseling. While Jason will touch quickly on these 4 components of a school counseling program in his introduction, the rest of the presentation will be focused on the curriculum piece. What we have then decided as a consequence of that is for counseling next year to go into a program review. And so they'll be in a 2-year program review that Dr. Weens will help run with the group to focus on those other 3 areas. So I think that's important to share with you now so that you don't feel like there's a big gap in what we're presenting tonight. It's just the first part of a bigger process for this team because they represent both a curriculum and a program. So with that, I will hand it over to Jason.
All right, thank you, Milena. So 2 things, full disclosure. Number 1, I normally go to bed at 9:30. So I'm gonna be up and I'm doing the 75 hard challenge and I haven't done my evening walk. And so I'm doing that too. So anyway, I told Milena I had this awesome SEL activity to do for you all, but I don't want to prolong it. So I'm just gonna hand out the gifts now. So chocolate this side and stress balls that way. Just bring it around. So enjoy that. Just got to get your SEL mojo going. You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. So again, my name is. Thank you. We're good. So again, my name is Jason Thompson. I also want to publicly thank Milena and Robin and Janet Cruz, who did some early work with us in our committee and our department. We have an awesome department that's here to serve the students, and so I hope I do them justice today. So number 1, as Milena mentioned, there's really 4 major parts of a school counseling program here in Missouri. So we have the school counseling curriculum, the individual student planning, responsive services, and system support. But today, again, we're going to focus mostly on school counseling curriculum. I'm going to briefly touch on 2 through 4 now, and then I'll focus on 1 for the rest of it. So individual student planning, if you think about that, really like a one-on-one counseling one-on-one, school counseling 101, think about transitioning, what we're doing for our kiddos to help them transition to the next level, next grade, and then even post-high school. So that's developing our ICAPs. That stands for our individual career and academic plans. So in 8th grade, every student will get that plan. We start that then, and then that plan will continue with them throughout their years and tenure at the high school. And then scheduling post-high school information, and then also working on activities for them too. Responsive services tends to be a bulk of what we do too. That's really that individual counseling, that group counseling, crisis counseling, consulting, then also coordinating with our outside agencies to support that tier 2, tier 3 support. Then finally, system support. That's really what we do to help the system of our schools, our buildings, and then our school district and our communities in general. That's us involved in committees, advocating, evaluating our programs, and things like that. So it's basically what we do for a comprehensive school counseling program. One thing I would stress is that when you look at your school counselors, just don't see them as individuals, they're a full program. And so this is the things that we do. So focusing on number one, school counseling curriculum that we're working with Milena the last 2 years, this is when we actually go in and teach lessons on various topics. In Missouri, they focus on 3 specific areas for our lessons. Number one is SEL, that's social emotional growth, also academic growth and academic skills, and then finally that career awareness. And so we really want to make sure we focus on those 3 things throughout our students' tenure. Yes, thanks. So with that, we had a few goals that we actually started a few years back before COVID. So really goal 1 and goal 3 are 2 that we did not really meet at that time just because of COVID and it slowed things down. So we felt that as a department, we really want to make sure that we focus on those so that every student has are able to fully implement the SEL in our 3rd goal, which would be career. I'll talk about that in a second. So goal 1, our major goal is to have a cohesive and vertically aligned K-12 social emotional curriculum. So that means when the kiddos come in all the way through 12th grade, that they're getting some type of SEL knowledge. As you all know, of course, with COVID, things kind of went down. Students were stressed out, anxiety, depressed, and things like that. So we really want to make sure that when students come in, they're getting seeds, they're getting information throughout their time about SEL. How that's done is sometimes through curriculum, outside agencies coming in speaking with students, and also through counseling and responsive services. So that's our first goal. Then our second goal is awesome too because when I say our department, I'm also focusing on our student service department. We partner with our social workers, which you'll hear probably around maybe 11:30. And then, not that late. And then we also partner with our wellness center. And so we work together on goal 2 because we really feel with SEL, it's not something else to add to the plate. SEL is the plate. Things are added to it. So for instance, I know sometimes, and of course not this district, maybe other districts, you may have some teachers that say, well, I don't go to school for that. I teach math, I teach social studies, I teach science, I don't teach SEL. Well, it's hard for a kid to learn how to do math if they're frustrated, if they have anxiety. It's hard for a student maybe to write a poem if they're stressed at home. It's hard for a student to do an art project if they just saw mom and dad get into this huge argument. So SEL is the plate. Things can be added on to that. So how do we help our staff? We want to make sure that we're providing them resources. And so the social workers, the wellness center, and the counselor are going to work with goal 2 on having a website, maybe other resources that our teachers can go to assist them on providing SEL in the classroom. It can be something really small, maybe a quick check-in, or even something more elaborate. So with that resource, we're going to have videos, we'll have websites, we'll have journals that they can go to and look at to enhance their programs. And of course, they'll have us as consulting. And some of us have already started co-teaching with individuals. I know in some schools, working with PE, working with health, working with art teachers, just combining their curriculum with SEL to work that together to focus on the whole child. Then goal 3. So once again, this was another goal that we had carry over from COVID because we didn't get a chance to really complete this goal. And that's really to have a K-12 vertically aligned career awareness and career development program for our kiddos. So I'm going to pause there because I know one meeting I went to, a parent asked a great question. So are you going to ask our kindergartners what careers they want to do? Absolutely not. But we want to drop that seed like, hey, there is something called the world of work. Also with middle school, there's something called a world of work. High school, there's something called a world of work. But how do you get there? Number one, how do you get to be a good student? Study habits. How do you get to make sure that you have self-awareness of yourself? Working with people, that's difficult. Making sure you're turning your assignments in on time. All that really equates to work also. So we're talking about careers and other lessons that we do. But Desi also mentioned that they want us to focus on career awareness. So we do that through elementary level, sometimes through books, through activities. It could be career fair, high school, maybe job shadowing, having people come in and share information about their careers. So we do that throughout our time at K-12, but we're not trying to tell students at this grade level, you must understand what a career is. It's more so focusing on those soft skills that's going to help them when they get to their careers. Any questions on that one? Okay. So goal 3, next one. how we're working on these goals make us better. So number one, it really will assist counselors with connecting with the Clayton's profile of a graduate. If you look at the profile, I believe that all of our goals, either directly or indirectly, focus on those components of a profile of a graduate. And we want to ensure that these competencies are ever present in everything that we do. Then last one, number two, we want to assist counselors with connecting to the district strategic plan. Goal number three, which really focuses on that SEL also. So by what we do with our three goals, we want to make sure we're connecting to the district's goals also. So that's how it's going to make us better. Then how do we get to the point where we want to get to our completing those goals? Next steps would be number one, updating our department websites. We actually worked with Melena's group, the Teaching and Learning Council, maybe back in November, October, and we saw that there were some gaps in our websites. They weren't really cohesive across the board. So we want to make sure that when stakeholders come in, they can find who we are, find what we do, and have the curriculums there, both in the buildings and the district level. Accumulating curriculum resources. Robin was great. She found an awesome resource that we use now to kind of assist and enhance our curriculum that we're using in the district, where we're actually teaching other SEL lessons to the students, and our teachers get a chance to use those also. We want to do more research to see what we can come in, bring in to make our best better in that area. Consulting with Java-like peers, that happens here in the district, statewide and nationally. So we're trying to figure out what we can do with our peers in our buildings to support our work. Again, partnering, co-facilitating lessons about how to bring SEL, how to bring career alive to our students. And then also looking at other counselors in other districts and across the nation. To get there, I'll believe in getting other people's knows, KNOWS, in our business. Because we know a lot, but we don't know it all. So get other people's knows into our business to help support our kiddos. And then number four, ongoing professional learning. We should be a culture of learning. So we want to make sure we're doing things that's going to help enhance us to reach our three goals. Then the final one, supporting teachers' SEL work, making sure that we're doing things to support the teachers as they work with the kiddos in the classrooms, because of course they're student facing more than we are many times. So we want to support them in that work and know that we're there to help them with that lift. And I believe that's, wow.
What questions?
Oh, what questions?
Okay, thank you. I agree. I had a note here, exactly what you both started off saying was we don't typically think of counseling as having a curriculum, but I actually think SEL curriculum is like more important now than ever. Exactly what you said, that it is the plate. Like no student can be successful academically if they're not mentally stable and healthy. So I just had a couple questions and comments about the goals. Goal one, I love the idea of being vertically aligned for the continuity. I think it helps our students, teachers, and families all be familiar and know what to expect year to year, school to school. And I because I'm on the teaching and learning advisory and I was there the day we did this, to me that really highlighted the need for that alignment. There was definitely, at least in my little group, a disconnect between schools and elementary and secondary with where we were. So I really like that is a goal. I had a couple questions on goal 2, and you even mentioned in next steps about supporting teachers, SEL work, and helping teachers identify needs there. I'm just wondering, like it says, it's not in this presentation, but I guess in the larger document we had, report, that you're proposing an opportunity for professional development around this work. Is there a reason that it's not going to be like mandatory? I think it is so important for teachers to have this work. Like I think back even to my own teaching, and I got a master's in school counseling, and how much that work and study of mine helped me in the classroom just to understand kids' social emotional well-being. And so I wanted clarity on that you're like proposing an opportunity to do it, but
no, we're proposing the assured professional
that specific
opportunity.
One. Okay,
right.
good.
So
okay.
it will be assured for all staff.
Okay.
It will probably look different level by level, but will be vertically aligned.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure we really, like, beyond what you're saying about posting things on the website or whatever, that we definitely are making sure our teachers all are trained in this.
Yes.
Okay, good. And then my only other question is, at the end of the report that we got, not in this presentation, you listed some funding needs at the end, and they weren't anything big. So my question is, do you, though, really have larger funding ideas that we could support, like what Jamie just said, human resources? Like, you know, we opened this wellness center at the high school, which has been great, but we haven't yet created or put, you know, invested in additional mental health services at the elementary and middle school level. So I'm just wondering, beyond some of those small funding needs, do you have ideas of larger things like that? And I know other districts, like my sister-in-law works in Parkway, she's a trauma coach, I forgot what it's called. She teaches teachers, you know, how to identify and react to and deal with trauma. Are there larger, like, dreams and wish lists you would have for funding like that?
I think a lot of that's going to come out in the program review.
Yeah.
I think from a curricular lens, I don't want to speak for you. Maybe I'll just let you speak.
No, you're right. That's beyond curriculum.
But from a curricular lens, I think we feel comfortable with where we're heading with this.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest purchase that I just put into Jason's budget today, and he doesn't know that I put into his budget, is the piloting of something 9 through 12 around SEL, because we have this program and resource that we're using K through 8, Character Strong, but having some opportunity to pilot some stuff there, which is bigger. But a lot of the stuff is going to come out of my existing budget, so that's why we're not asking for sort of an additional influx of funding.
And right,
here,
I guess, right.
because
This was
I
a
think it's going to
curriculum
come from the programming aspect.
Yeah. I just want, like, I think this, so beyond curriculum, I guess, so we'll get to that. But I think this board has shown that it is a priority to us too, that we'd be open to, and the Wellness Center is proof of that, that we are open to, like, come ask us for that. Like, I think we all believe in the importance of mental health services and support for our kids. So.
And I'm gonna ask for that early, so thank you. I appreciate that, but I definitely, it's a need. I think wellness centers at all the buildings, maybe more staff to support with that SEL is important. So I'm glad you all are thinking about it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's just go around. So I love thank you for the report, and I love that those 3 goals. Maybe just the way that, like, in my brain that I look at it as, it's almost, you know, you've got the school counseling program, and it's sort of then, there's 2 arms to it almost. It's kind of bifurcated. You've got the social emotional arm, and then you have the college and career readiness component. And it seems like sometimes those 2 get maybe muddy, you know, there's not a lot of clear differentiation, I guess, between the 2, who's running the 2. But I do think they're 2 very different things, the social emotional component and the, you know, the vertically aligned SEL program. And I see how both of those, how they all fit out under the school counseling umbrella. But then, you know, that versus, you know, building a more comprehensive and intentional college and career readiness program seems like a whole different animal than the social emotional component of it. And I guess I'm just wondering if we're thinking about it that way, or if maybe I'm thinking about it wrong.
I would say so. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, were you finished?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. I would say so both and. So I believe both are important. Again, both the SEL and the career were goals that we had before. That moment we didn't get a chance to meet because of COVID and it slowed things down.
Yeah.
But because of that, we think they're both important. So number one, you need that SEL just in general in day to day. But
Right.
you also need the other goal 3. You need that, well, it's a DESE standard too, as far as career. So we wanted to include that because DESE said that's what every student should get in K-12 learning. But if you combine them both, that means you're making a well-rounded student and a well-rounded citizen. So I think that we're going to work on both of them. And then the goal would be hopefully over the next 3 years when we do our review for our program, if we find gaps, then we'll come to you all to kind of share, here are gaps, and here's some things we need to fill those gaps in.
I think a lot of what you're talking about, Amy, falls into the individual student planning piece. But thinking about it, what I think I hear you saying is, like, thinking about it also from, like, throughout a child's career within the district, that it be sequential and purposeful, and that it's maybe not feeling that way to you right now.
Right. It feels like, and just, yeah, it doesn't feel very, I agree, I do agree that both of them are equally important, and exposing students to, encouraging them to find their passion in middle school so that once they get to high school, they can, further explore their passions purposefully as it might apply, so that they can, for college purposes, or I just don't know that there's a lot of instruction for kids on some of these, how you take what you're, starting in elementary school and then in middle school, and then you take what you learn, and encouraging kids to, find something that they're passionate about and then do something with that in high school. It's really important for the college application process. And I just don't know that there's a lot of instruction on that part, and just the exploring, what is a kid good at? And it's all different. It's different, what's good for my kid is different than, Stacy's or Jason's children, but they're all great at different things, and encouraging them to tap into that potential part of being part of the college and career readiness. I don't know. I probably don't know what I'm talking about because I'm not an expert in that.
No, I think that's a great question. And the hope is once we can continue is that we are doing those things. We're talking to the elementary kiddos about just what it means to be a good student, a good person, self-efficacy.
Yeah.
Getting to the middle school, we kind of do some of the questionnaires and surveys on your interest survey, your career readiness survey, and then also your leadership skills. Then taking that, build that to the high school, and they take the baton and go deeper and think about job shadowing, and then your different careers on based on what line do you want to do and what kind of classes you take. The ICAP helps with that also. Again, that starts in the 8th grade, and we are looking at on some of the questions we ask on your learning styles. What are some things that you think about that you want to do? What are some of your hobbies? And then that ICAP follows them year after year, and they check in with their counselor at least once a year to build that ICAP. And then that's used when you talk about 12th grade and getting ready for college and post-high school. So it does stay with them. And again, that's a DESE requirement too to start at 8th grade.
Makes sense. All right.
Okay, so you'll have to stop me if it's not part of curriculum and it's more part of the programming. Just say, no, Kim, we'll talk about that next year. But one of the things that I've noticed as I've had kids kind of come up through the elementary and then the middle schools, and now all of my kids are in the high school, and now I have a daughter who's a senior who has just gone through the college kind of post-secondary school application process, is when you're considering the curriculum, at least from our experience in the district, and I know we're not supposed to talk about individual experiences in the context of the board, but I'm in this instance going to make an exception. Maya is the kind of program that high school seniors use, and they start using that when they become juniors. And that's kind of one of the first times, I think, that high schoolers explore kind of, that tool I think is great. It has the types of things that say, what are you interested in? What subjects have you enjoyed? It kind of then puts together, I wouldn't say a comprehensive plan. That's done with the counselor, with your parents, or individually by the student. But it kind of gives you a framework to think about what you want to do after high school. I think waiting until the start of your senior year is a little too late for that. Kind of back to what Amy was trying to get to. And maybe this is because we're both having kids that are having just experienced this for the first time. If there's any way to get, from a curriculum standpoint, some of those tools or some of that type of exploration done earlier, and there are other classes in the high school that allow for that. Some of the, what am I thinking about? Catalyst is one of them, but there's also the, there's also like the biomedical, explore biomedical careers classes and some of the other stuff. Lead the Way, Project Lead the Way. Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. I think that stuff is great and probably part of the interdisciplinary curriculum stuff that you think about from a counseling department when you're working with the different departments within the high school. The other thing that I've heard just through feedback of other parents experiencing kind of the what happens after high school, experience with their own kids this year is that I think as a district, we do a pretty fantastic job about college readiness and that aspect, and particularly for traditional kind of four-year college. I don't think we're particularly strong, though, at espousing the benefits of community colleges or technical schools or students that may be interested in being policemen or firefighters or golf course managers, and these are some of the things that I've heard that kids that are graduating this year from Clayton High School are interested in. And so again, somehow figuring out a way where we're valuing that for those students so they don't feel left out from a social emotional, from an SEL standpoint, just overall, as the bulk of their peer group is gearing up towards the traditional college application. I think, how is there something curriculum-wise that you're thinking about to address that? Because I think that they're kind of a smaller but frankly underserved population of our high school right now. I think that's going to be important.
This just quick question, and I thought maybe this might be also part of where Amy was going, but what is the line of sort of demarcation between counseling and social work? And maybe you guys want to respond when you come up next, but I think that part is fuzzy for me.
Yeah.
There's actually, we used to have a Venn diagram. So I'll say for the counseling part. So we focus on those 4 areas.
Yeah.
And so I think for us, when we normally bring in our social workers, at least for our buildings, is at that tier 2, tier 3. So tier 1, that's all the kids are getting that.
Okay.
So with our school counseling curriculum we're talking about today, all the children get the same lessons. Or we may bring an outside speaker in to talk to about, say, anxiety with grade level 3. So all the kids will get that. When students need more support, kind of think about what the principals are here about a half hour ago when they were sharing some of that tier support. When the kiddo needs more than just that check-in, as Jason mentioned, that check-in, they need something additional. So then we'll say social workers. We have a kiddo that maybe has school refusal or having some anxiety going on where just checking in with me periodically is not enough right now. So let me call my social worker to see how she can support that student on an ongoing basis. And then we collaborate. Doesn't mean that child still won't come to the counselor, but that tier 2 support is more involved. Also, the social worker can assist with connecting those parents to an outside agency if need be. So yeah, okay. So kind of working in tandem, but again, we're counselors again more so tier 1 when need be, social workers tier 2, tier 3.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And then just a comment, and I don't even expect you to respond to this, but we talk a lot about social emotional wellness and learning for students. We don't hear a lot about that for teachers who go through their own, mental health issues, dealing with kids that have mental health issues. And really, I guess it's an employee benefits question, perhaps more than anything else. But it's not, I'd be curious to know at some point what we do for teachers, whether we have it's an EAP or
staff
something.
in general, teachers, admin,
Yeah.
We do have an EAP program.
Okay. All right.
And just that website for Go To, one of the links is going to be self-care for staff.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't have much to say. This was good, and I will just make a statement. I think it's great that you're using the strategic plan as your guide. I mean, sometimes we kind of miss that. We miss that opportunity, and we can kind of get off a little bit sidetracked. But I think that's going to help us stay focused. And so far, everything you talked about, this is exploratory, right? This is exploratory, right? Right? This is exploratory. What we're learning tonight. This is the first time we're hearing this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I said it 5 times. Yeah. No one really, the hell. No, but I do appreciate it. I do appreciate it, and this is really good. And I think I need some more time to just think through it. But as of right now, I mean, all my answers for answering that when I read the document. So good job. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for staying so late.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the, thank you for the candy and the,
Take your, yeah.
Thanks for the treats.
You are welcome. You're welcome.
Good night, Jason.
I know. I took a break.
Just throw it at each other.
I know y'all are making me just feel bad.
What?
Now y'all are just making me feel bad. Oh, thanks, Jason. I appreciate the 2 minutes.
All right. I feel like we're the closing pitchers of a very important game. No pressure. We got this. I know. We got this. We got this. Well, well, thank you, everybody, for your patience. And I want to thank Jason Thompson and Melina Garganigo also for their work on that counseling report. And I look forward to collaborating with them on the next phase of the program study for that team. And certainly grateful for their leadership and collaboration with the social work department, which falls under student services. And tonight I have Katie Burkhardt, who services our family center in our 3 elementary schools, and Lauren Stolting, who services Wydown and Clayton High School, to the table tonight with me. Little fun fact, the social work department here in the school district of Clayton is only 7 years old. So these positions were created right before the 2017-2018 school year, and they have gained a lot of ground and really have solidified themselves as incredible resources, not just to our students and our staff, but also to our families in the community. And they have shown great leadership also in the region with the Social Work Professional Learning Network. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about our background, more background about the program itself and what we learned during our self-study, and then we'll go over the goals and how it connects to the profile of a graduate. So as I said before, the social work positions were created about 7 years ago, and the ethics and principles of the social work team are really rooted in the National Association of Social Workers and the School Social Worker Association of America's standards and ethics. And we have also, over time, aligned their evaluations to those standards as well. So back in the fall, we also participated in a meeting with the Teaching and Learning Advisory Council that had parents, students, and staff. And we were interested as a team to learn more about what the perceptions were from our community and stakeholders about the social work role in general, what their understanding was of how to access our district social workers, and then also what their current level of visibility was around the resources that are available through our social work team. And we found a couple of really interesting things. First of all, we found out that we have a lot of work to do around visibility. Some folks didn't quite know that there was a social worker assigned to certain buildings and didn't know exactly who they were or what they did. They also weren't aware of some of the direct outreach, both supporting our parents, again, information available through our website, and then also how to access more information through our social workers. So we realized that was something that we wanted to use to inform the establishing of our goals. Another thing that we did was we looked at a lot of data that the social workers had been collecting on an annual basis. And some of those data sources were reasons for referrals, how we were using our money, what does the work actually look like in terms of providing service to our students and families and staff. And what we found was that on average, our social workers receive about 100 referrals each year. This does not include referrals to our special education social worker. And the top reasons for those referrals were anxiety related based on the student, and then also the family needing assistance with community-based resources. Other reasons for referrals included family challenges such as family separation or divorce, peer relationships, and then challenges with attention and impulsivity, and then also challenging feelings that students were experiencing. And so all of that work informed the way the social workers approached their goals and what the steps were going to be related to those goals. So at this point, I will hand it over to Katie and Lauren.
is it on? So as a result of the self-study and all the feedback that we got, we did, as a social work department, we have 3 goals. The first one, as you can see, it's up there. It's really about that visibility piece that Robin talked about. We want this district and the families to know that we do exist and we're here to support students and families and teachers. So we kind of have next steps in terms of that first goal, in terms of like resource distribution and daily work with children and families. The couple of things that we're going to do. One, we do already have a social work website that Katie's already built. This is my first year, so most of it's back on her and the former social worker. We're going to take a look at our social work website. We're going to see how we can update the resources, some of our community partnerships, any other relevant information that parents need or families need or students need. Make sure it's accessible, make sure it's functional for them so they know how to find it. And then another second step is that we're going to start adding some more community resources and events into district communications, so newsletters, emails, anything that might be coming up or things that might be like pertinent for families to know about. Things that we're seeing like in terms of like a trend of students that they're dealing with, like if it's anxiety, maybe we can send an article on anxiety to families. And then we're also going to create a family-facing and needs assessment, which you don't currently have, but it's a nice way for families to anonymously either contact Katie or myself to fill out a survey, say this is what we specifically need without having to wait for us to email them about like holiday assistance or any other resources. It's them saying this is what I specifically need, and for us to kind of gauge a pattern of those needs for the family or for the district. Goal 2 is to strengthen our assessment and intervention practices for the purpose of accurately measuring student growth. Next steps for that over the next couple of years will be Kay and I are going to research an evidence-based assessment for like social emotional concerns so we can better identify students that have specific concerns and then how we can help them get better interventions for those difficulties that they're having. We're going to acquire that assessment once we find it. We're going to keep collaborating with the counselors and the building teams. So I know the principals all talked about that MTSS structure, the multi-tiered systems of supports. So we come in, Jason did a really good job explaining like the tier 2, tier 3. That's when Katie and I will come in and kind of talk about what have we tried at tier 1, what can we try at tier 2. So we'll often be added to those meetings in terms of like kind of talking about what are next steps for the students that are still struggling with tier 1. And then we're also going to create another survey for caregivers. So once Katie and I work with them, what did they enjoy? Was it helpful? Do they have suggestions for us? Do they need anything else? So that's just data for us to have based on like what families, whether or not they liked us, or if we did a good job, or how we can improve supporting families. And the third goal Jason already talked about, which is the one that we are sharing with them in terms of that tier 1 support for teachers. We're helping kind of collect those articles, the videos, the podcasts, anything that's going to be on that teacher website. And that way teachers can access it. We'll have it kind of in different categories, whether it's conflict or anxiety or other resources that teachers can have. And then we're going to make a teacher resource page, and then Katie and I are going to try and find a universal screener so we can kind of identify bigger patterns within the district of other concerns. Right, did I miss anything? Okay.
So when we consider the connection to the profile of a graduate, all of the work that we're doing with students, our goal is always to increase access to learning by removing barriers, whether that barrier be access to food or housing, whether that barrier be relationships with peers, or whether that barrier be a mental health concern that's impacting how they show up to school. So through that individual work with students and working with families, we're always looking to build the competencies laid out in the profile of a graduate in the hopes that when students leave us, they are ready to go into the world. How will we be better as a result of these goals? We hope that will increase our visibility and access to students and families. As licensed clinical social workers, we feel that we have a professional responsibility to use evidence-based assessment, intervention, and then evaluation practices. So we hope not only to grow ourselves as practitioners, but also strengthen our department and thereby the work that we're doing with students and families. And then by collaborating with the counseling department and the wellness center to support all staff, we hope that we can really make an impact at that tier 1 level in how we're supporting students across the district. what questions do you have for us?
Yeah. How do you have the time to do all of this additional administrative work and measurements, which I think are very important, when I know for a fact that you guys are, as only 2 of you covering 5 schools, already overburdened with the amount of actual casework that you're dealing with?
That's a great question. I
mean, I know you guys are like super women, but before I came on the board, I worked very closely with your predecessors that were here. So I have some inside knowledge as to the, types of cases and the types of casework that you deal with. And I'm just wondering, I mean, I think this program is, what you have laid out here is great. I find it hard to fathom how you're going to be able to get all of this done in addition to the service work that you're already doing professionally to support students and families.
I think a lot of, the goals we've laid out also involve a lot of collaboration with the rest of the Student Services Department. And also we are both very involved in a regional network of school social workers that we meet 5 times throughout the school year, but then there's constant collaboration like online and in different ways. So I think a lot of the work that we're doing, we're not recreating the wheel. We're going to be working closely both with professionals in the district and outside of the district to take what's already working and, apply it to our own practice. But it will be difficult and it will take time.
Yeah, it is difficult. But I will say we're also really blessed with really good community partnerships. So we have Center for Mindfulness, we have Kids in the Middle, we have Safe Connections, thank you, that also come in and help us service those students that have those specific needs. So even though we do take the brunt of like the caseload and like working one-on-one, we are very lucky to have people come in and help us with like bigger groups of students that have the same need. So that kind of helps us.
So do you feel like there's additional resources that you want to ask the board for or think about asking the board for maybe before you come back? Or I guess we'll see how you do here in this first year of trying to climb this mountain. But
yeah, I would say that our students' social emotional needs and mental health needs are evolving very quickly. And I think going into this school year, we probably felt it the hardest since the 5 years that I've been in this school district. And so I think the information that comes from the counseling study as well as the work with these 2 will be really, really important because even though maybe our enrollment isn't dramatically different than what it was maybe 5 years ago, what is very different though is the level of need. And so I think one of the advantages of investing some time in universal screeners and some of these other assessment tools is one, to find out what are the services that we're currently providing that are the most high leverage moves, and then how can we help find students and identify students with needs before the needs reach tier 3. And so that way, and can we identify them sooner so that way we are sending healthier and healthier students to the middle school, if we find them earlier in their growth. So I do think that that is something that we'll need to take a closer look at because, to your point, if we look at the number of students, like the denominator, and then the number of adults, that need is definitely feeling some pressure points.
Yeah, and I know it's not just students that we have in this district. You help entire families, students that are not even of school age, parents, step-parents, caregivers, grandparents. So I guess what I want to say is thank you for the very important work that you do, because it is only by virtue of that assistance and support and help that you give them that they're even, partially prepared to be able to sit in class and listen to the person that's in the front of the room trying to teach them. So yeah, the work that you guys do is the most important. So
Thank you.
And that's a lot more work that I just saw that's getting put on your plate. So good luck with that.
I'm sorry to go out of order. What I was going to say was exactly like piggybacking on what Kim's saying is, I want everyone to realize at the board and watching home or whatever, we are so fortunate to have social workers in our district, first of all, just even to begin with. Most school districts do not have social workers. And even like Kim saying, we only have 2 for 5 schools, but we are so fortunate to have 2 for 5 schools. And so I want everyone to realize that just even having them here is so great. And also what Kim said as far as additional funding needs or even human resources or whatever, as we've always said, we're here for it. And I know you mentioned in the larger report, like you have a discretionary fund, but I know that's funded just by PTOs and parents. So
Principals discretionary.
if those, needs grow, just like, we've always said, we are like, our mental health and wellness of our students and families is important to all of us. So if you identify more partnerships that you need or whatever, just don't hesitate to come. Thank you for all the very important work you did, just like Kim said. And I feel lucky to have social workers and lucky to have the 2 of you as our social workers. So thanks.
Well, Stacy sort of took my first comment. No, it's fine. It's fine. No, just to say, I'm not going to repeat the whole thing. So, but I agree with that. But I do want to ask. You said something about sharing resources with parents and families, like, and I see in the email blast, go here or whatever it is. I do hear from parents, that like, do we ever think about helping parents think about exactly how to talk to their kids about something, right? Like an event happens, an event today happened at Merrimack, we've had other instances at Merrimack recently, where you say, this is what we told your kid, and these are some bullet points on what you might want to say to your kid. Because I think that's just sort of what I hear from the community is like, this is all great. I tense up. I really don't know how to talk to my kid about what happened last month, for example, or whatever it is. So does that do we think about that, or is it, or is that maybe outside of scope for the work, or?
I think we're doing that a lot on an individual basis with individual students and families that we're working with. I think it's definitely an area we could look at for growth on just a more kind of systemic level, as when things occur, or as Lauren mentioned, part of the needs assessment work that we want to do is looking at trends that parents are seeing so that we can be more responsive and more proactive in that sense. So I don't think it's out of scope, right?
And we've taken, as an example with what Katie just said, with my work with them as well as with the counselors and what I hear from the principals, that creates opportunities for us to leverage, for example, our partnership with the All in Clayton Coalition to figure out who are some parent education experts that we can bring in and tag team some things on. And a lot of them more recently have been related to social media, mental health, how to have those hard conversations with your student about, how are you going to exit stage left if there's a party that, things are happening, et cetera. And I think that we need to continue to normalize those conversations, especially being more proactive, so that way when the reactive moments happen, we can supplement with additional information, but that we also have built a good foundation. And I think that's something that's important for all of us.
Well, I just want to say, once again, I appreciate you all using the profile of the graduate as a reference, as a guide. I think we kind of got off course during COVID, and just getting back on it. It feels like the work that we put in when we created that strategic plan is not going to waste. Yeah, I think it's very important that we use the plan and seeing it come alive. And it's a live document as well, but seeing it come alive today, after 5 years now, is it's kind of satisfying. So I appreciate that, and and kudos to you guys, because you all do have a lot on your plate, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing and the collaborative work that everyone's doing as well with you all. So thank you very much. I mean, no questions, just comments, and yeah.
Thank you.
I just have one question related to, I guess, accessibility, which I guess falls under visibility, kind of. So can a child, do they have to be identified somehow as in being like in need of a tier 2 intervention to access a social worker, or can a child if they feel like they have a need to discuss an issue, or do they have access to you without that tier 2 identification?
I was gonna say, well, I'm at the middle school and the high school, so it's basically like an open door. I mean, it's better sometimes if we have a referral from like a counselor or a parent, so we can kind of get more information of things that have already been done to support the student. But absolutely, if one of the students even like drops by my office and says, "This, I had a big fight with my parent this morning," or "I'm having a breakup," or something like that, they know that they can come in and talk with me. It doesn't have to be this formal social work referral. Should it move on to where I need to start meeting with them more frequently, or they're in need of more coping skills, or they're just not managing the situation well, then that might be more of like a more intensive intervention where I would get like the parents involved. But no, they can absolutely access us and you as well at any time. Like there's no closed door or anything.
Do they know? Do you feel like the kids know that that's available?
So that's a conversation that we've had ongoing over the last 7 years of just what is the best way to, I guess, like advertise or, kind of give that messaging to students because in one way we wanted to really follow the MTSS model and part of that was so that we are utilizing our human resources most efficiently, in that having the counselors be the gatekeepers in that first line of defense. And then if greater support is needed, the idea is that a counselor or administrator would make the referral to us. Mm-hmm. So we have not yet put out like a student referral form where students can just say, "I need to see you," similar to the way the counselors operate. We have not done that yet, in some ways to protect our time. But at the same time, just naturally, it's evolved to that, staff and students know who we are and know they can come talk to us. I would say it's probably more frequent at the secondary level that students will just walk into Lauren's office versus mine. And I think a lot of that is just also the differences in counseling from secondary to elementary, and just that the elementary counselors, I think are spend a lot of time in the classroom. So a lot of the students know them and they see all grade levels. So I think it's just a little bit different, but it's something that we constantly are going back and forth on the best way to do that.
I think we have one more question. Is it safe to assume that, well, I think you all mentioned I want to say it again. Is it safe to assume that there's a correlation, obviously, with the way kids are learning and mental health, correct? Right.
Yes.
Right. So, could EduClimber is that a part of your system? Could EduClimber be a part of the process? And I don't want to go up into a long explanation, but can you, with brevity, tell me how it would work with EduClimber, how different teachers and counselors can see this, and it works so that we can identify folks who may need help.
And can you also, when you're answering, talk about how that works with HIPAA?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, so we have to be really thoughtful about the amount of information that we put into the shared platforms for FERPA and HIPAA-related reasons. One data source, though, that is very, very helpful to this team in terms of kind of being able to triangulate some of the other data points is our panorama information. So while obviously we don't know how students answered very specific questions, when it aggregates their score, we can use that as a way to figure out like what has their challenging feelings overall score been, and how does that compare to their peers? So that has been a really important piece, and as they mentioned in the earlier presentation, we are working with Panorama to figure out the best way for us to be able to import some of the data that we collect after each survey to create a more full picture of each child. But in terms of the MTSS process, it's a huge piece in helping understand the historical performance academically, also helps us with attendance as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think there's a HIPAA part to that too. Did you answer that part?
Yeah, so overall, I think when it comes to any of the shared platforms, we are very intentional about what remains in personal notes versus information that should be tracked in any of our student information systems.
Gotcha. All right, that seems very difficult, that balance right there. So, good luck.
are there any further questions? Yes, thank you. Okay, so we are on to consent agenda. I move that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda for agenda items 6.02 through 6.10. It's been moved and seconded.
I do have a couple questions, sorry. I
Go
know it's
ahead.
late, sorry. I noticed one of the things in consent agenda is increasing the price of Kid Zone. And it just brought up the question for me, do we ever or often have families that say they need Kid Zone, but it's cost prohibitive, and how do we work with them on that? Or do we?
We have, in the past few years, we have not had that. However, we would work with the families. Usually the director will inform us that we have a certain family that needs that, and then we would work with them on scholarships.
Okay, good. Thank you. And then my second consent agenda, actually, it was just a comment that I'm really happy to be voting on the field hockey partnership with the other two schools, U City and Rosati Kane. I think our football partnership with Brentwood has proven how great it is for all of our kids, but also just as a community partnership with other, schools in the region. And certainly U City and Rosati Kane represent two completely different, types of demographics. Thank you, that was the word I was looking for. Demographics in our region. So I think it will be great for our kids for many reasons. I mean, first and foremost, to have a field hockey team for all the kids that want it, but also I just think having peers and teammates from other demographic areas, and just for our districts to create partnerships that might lead somewhere else. But anyway, I think that's great, and I'm happy to be voting on that tonight.
Yeah, we should thank Steve Hudson and the other athletic directors for their, creativeness and making sure that those types of programs survive through cooperation. I think it's great.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? And I want to thank, on behalf of the district, Positive Black Men, Inc. for their generous donation of $1,000 to the Boys Basketball Booster, and Clayco for their generous donation of $5,000 to support the robotics program. So thank you to both of those entities. And let's see, now we are on to board communications. Let's see, Jason, was there equity?
Yep. So equity walkthroughs start next week. Building equity progress report data is getting hammered down in terms of what data we want to include. Started discussion for the equity committee retreat this summer. That's it.
What's that, the equity retreat?
Say it again?
What is that, this summer?
Yeah, there's an equity retreat. Cameron, you want to expound upon that?
It's been a while. No, so we started this last summer where we take a full day retreat to where we plan out our initiatives and plans for the year in terms of what we want to tackle in terms of a department.
Oh, for like the staff?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got it, okay. I thought we were doing like a whole retreat for the students. I was like, cool.
It's an idea.
That'd be fun too.
That would be fun too, okay. Awesome. Thank you. I think everything else,
I had
you have an update?
Yeah, I had, I'm on the calendar committee, and we had our first meeting tonight with the goal of developing, next year's calendar set, but with the goal of developing the calendar for 2 years from now. This is the first of, at max 5 meetings, but hopefully 3 or 4 meetings. And it's a great, we had a great first meeting going over and kind of ranking and rating priorities and kind of wish list items we'd like to see in the calendar. It's a great group of all levels of teachers, support staff, administrators, parents, and me. And so it's very inclusive of all stakeholders, you know, opinions and views on the calendar. So that was great. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention is that Chris and I both registered to go to the MSBA Advocacy Day in Jeff City on April 9th, which I'm looking forward to. I haven't done that before. And if anyone still would like to join us, you're welcome to. I think we're just gonna just drive up in the morning and drive home that night. Just go for the day.
Can I go with you?
You want to? Okay.
I do.
So, yeah, that's it.
All right.
I do have one thing.
Yes.
I was sick for it, but there was a Clayton Education Foundation meeting, and so I would be remiss not to mention the gala on April 13th. And I was going to go this year, but it was brought to my attention a few hours ago that I'm going to a dance recital instead. So sorry, Allie, if you're actually watching this. But I do think, in general, I'd like to go next year. I do think it's something the board needs to start to go to and support. Is one annual dinner a year. You know, we should start going to that stuff.
Awesome. Okay, so I think with that we can adjourn. I'll have Stacy.
I move that the Board of Education adjourn.
All in favor?